in the heart of an unrecognizable frozen city, where all infrastructure has completely collapsed and every mode of transportation is at a standstill, an urgent report comes in. Earth has rapidly entered a new ice age. Braving the intense cold, a courageous correspondent struggles to deliver the news, his microphone freezing more with each passing second. He informs the world that global temperatures will continue to plummet with no end in sight. But he urges the public not to give up hope. Balling his fist, he projected confidence that the government had not forgotten about its citizens in these tough times. That as long as they stand together, the people of this strong nation will overcome this daunting crisis. Just as he was about to spiel more unity propaganda to quell the masses, a whole-ass frozen airplane made a crash landing in the middle of the city, plowing through the reporter and his whole crew. A man watched this final shot of the last news broadcast covered by the remaining TV station in the country. He watched it on a miserably frozen screen. After that plane crash landed on top of the remaining news network team, the TV finally cut into static. No more overcast news coverage of what's happening outside. The room of our protagonist, Han Feng, painted a picture of someone who tried to fight but finally gave up. He did not even bother cleaning up the mess of what little supplies he had left. The area around his entrance is filled with boxes of useless stuff and dwindling provisions. Outside, someone had been knocking quite hard and calling his name in a panic. Finally hearing the incessant calling of his name, Han Feng stood up from his filthy, frozen apartment, took a steel bat modified with some nails, traces of blood still visible on its surface, and walked towards the door. Han Feng was gaunt. He had the combination of the thickest possible winter wear, but it was not enough to stave off the cold. He slowly and carefully peeked at the peephole to see who was on the other side of the door. Who he saw shocked him. It also excited him a little bit. It was a woman he was very familiar with before the Ice Age even kicked in. She also had her thickest winter wear on, but standing outside, exposed to the elements, made her face red and her body shiver uncontrollably. Han Feng opened the door with a slight flush on his face. The woman's name is Hyona, and he has no idea what she is doing outside of his door. Still holding the bat, he urged her to come inside where it was warmer and safer. These days, the outside world has turned into a dangerous, lawless land. Hyona swung the door open wider to enter Han Feng's relatively safer room. The next thing you know, she was already grabbing him by the collar and pushing her lips onto his. Her little bonnet even fell with how fast she moved. Han Feng was surprised, but he did not pull back, and his cheeks got even redder. This deep and passionate kiss went on for way too long, if you ask me. But let our boy get some of that sloppy kiss action in the middle of an abandoned hallway outside his home. When they separated, both Han Feng and Hyona were breathing heavily, their tongues still out, spit still dribbling. The world is ending, and this is what they're doing. Totally understandable. Realizing what just happened, Han Feng pulled back and asked what had gotten into this woman that she would just grab him and kiss him the second he opened the door. Still trying to catch her breath, she confessed that she had a realization that Han Feng was the man that she truly loved all this time. Tears were starting to form in the corner of her expressive eyes while telling him that he was the one she was supposed to be with all along. It takes a crisis to see someone's true colors, to see who really cares for you, who will be there for you, no matter how hard things get. Speaking of hard, Hyona wanted to prove that what she was saying was the truth by taking Han Feng's hands and putting them against her chest to feel how fast her heart beating. She promised that she would be willing to do anything just so they could be together now. Hearing the word anything wiped out any semblance of rationality in our boy's brain. All the red flags turned green. To finally seal the deal, Hyona started pressing her thighs against Han Feng's flagpole while grinding and pulling him closer. He did not stand a chance at all. The world might be encased in ice and supplies might be low, but he was heating up like never before and something was rising in the lower regions. Han Feng looked at Hyona's eyes as she caressed his cheeks tenderly. He confessed that those words she just said meant the world to him. However, the door frame is not the right place for them to continue this. Hyona gently shushed him so he would not say another word. All she wants right now is for Han Feng to close his eyes and feel the moment. Against his logical mind, Han Feng did what she asked. Now that his eyes were closed, he asked what was supposed to happen next. Well, that's when another guy comes in, gripping the door ominously. This mystery guy swung the frozen door wide open, locked onto Han Feng's head, and smashed a blunt weapon with killing intent. Poor Han Feng did not see it coming. His skull was crushed while his eyes were closed. It was a bloody and brutal mess. A cruel sneak attack splattered blood all over the apartment entrance. Hyona and the mystery man entered the apartment. She shivered and stuttered, seemingly shocked that her partner in crime would actually kill Han Feng. The man scoffed and told her to stop playing innocent, for she knew this was the only way this encounter could go. The world went to hell a long time ago. One less mouth to feed is not going to change anything. Enough about dwelling on the brutal attack. It's time to see what this Han Feng chump has been hoarding. If they play their cards right, they might even get enough supplies to survive until rescue comes. The messed up part was that Han Feng did not die immediately. He lay down on the freezing cold ground, trembling in agony, while all the blood that he was not really clear as to what happened. But he could not move. Maybe it has come. Perhaps he was finally dying. He can finally know what it feels like to lose his life. The last thing he saw was the mystery man and that evil witch, Hyona, flirting a few meters away from his limp body. He's been touching her in places he could only dream of as he promises to reward her for her best actress performance that made the whole operation possible. As Han Feng's eyes closed for good, the hatred he felt for that cold-hearted felt unbearably heavy. He swore that if there was a next life, he would never let himself be a lovesick puppy again. In the empty darkness that he was plunged into, Han Feng started seeing little droplets of light. It started from a little speck that started growing into something bigger and more substantial. As it got even brighter, Han Feng started questioning what the hell was happening. He subconsciously extended his arm. His skin was translucent, like it was an entirely different entity. The warm light attracted him after suffering through the endless cold of the real world. May this be the path to heaven, but the golden light suddenly changed its color to red. Now what kind of heaven has this crimson color? After being baited by the golden light and trying to reach out for it, Han Feng, or at least an abstract construct of his body, felt his limbs getting shredded like he was being put through a meat grinder. Nothing goes well for this man. It did not take too long for the crimson light to cover his entire body as he let out a miserable scream of agony. His translucent frame disintegrates piece by piece. The dark nothingness was filled with his scattered essence. And Han Feng was gone. Still feeling the pain of getting ground and deconstructed atom by atom, he woke up in a cold sweat, screaming for his life. The pain was way too real. He was seduced into closing his eyes, bonked in the head for being too horny, died a depressing death, woke up in an empty void, got tricked into being torn from an atomic level, and now he doesn't know where he is. He looked around, and the sun shone bright through his balcony. His soft and comfortable bed was nice and clean. The air felt fresh as it lifted his curtains up. Han Feng was far from the cruel world he had gotten used to. It took him 30 minutes to absorb the wild things that had happened to him over the past few hours. He spent those 30 minutes reveling in the perfect view of the residential area overlooking his apartment. Han Feng could not get over the fact that the sun was shining again. He missed its warmth and its light. He thought that he would never feel this type of comfort and warmth ever again. He just checked the date, and it seems to be that it's the morning of June 28th, as far as he could remember. The Ice Age apocalypse will start on July 15th. He was supposed to die after being ambushed, but he was somehow brought back in time half a month before the end of civilization. In other words, he has been reborn and given the ultimate second chance. Aside from the memories he retained from the previous timeline, there is something different this time. Something strange was happening inside his body, and it might have manifested in his hands. Ever since he woke up, there's been a red glow wrapped around his right hand the whole time. He tried wiping it off, waving it away. But nothing made it disappear. It doesn't hurt. It just feels warm. It did not seem to do anything else aside from the light, and he thought that he was just imagining things at first. Han Feng must have stayed so long pondering what was happening on his balcony that he started sneezing. As he wiped his nose of the mess, he noticed that the red glow in his right hand had mysteriously turned to a green one. Then something happened that made him panic. The hand that was wrapped around by the green glow started getting bigger, growing in length as if his bones, flesh, and skin were stretching out. Anyone will freak out if they see their hands doing that. Afraid and confused, Han Feng stormed into his room and slammed the balcony door shut as fast as he could. He managed to make it inside before anything more drastic happened. He was huffing and puffing for air, but the hand seemed to have turned back to normal. The green glow was still there, though lingering and seemingly inexhaustible. Han Feng looked at it helplessly. There were beams of light shooting out of his hand. How would modern science even justify or explain a mysterious phenomenon like this after the lengthening incident outside? Now it's shrinking very slowly. The green light seems to be an erratic thing. It shrinks and grows unpredictably, not like the stationary red one at all. But that's still a mystery, too. Sitting down on his couch, Han Feng suddenly felt a pang of unbearable exhaustion. He hasn't done much aside from running back inside, but he feels drained. This might be connected to the green light. Frustrated, he started swinging his arms all over the place, trying to get a semblance of a clue as to what this really was. Then it hit him. Isn't this just like those Manhwa stories that he loves to read? He immediately sprinted to the kitchen and grabbed his sharpest knife. In those Manhwas that he loves, the protagonist always starts their stories by being reborn. Just like them, maybe he will gain cheat-like powers. He wanted to test this out by grabbing the coolest thing he could imagine and posing with it. After a few minutes of waiting for something to happen, anything to change, Han Feng just scratched his head in shame as the sharp knife did not react with the light in his hand at all. He was so busy trying to find out if he had some fantastic cheat-like powers that he neglected his exhaustion and the rumbling of his stomach. He's just starving at this point. Unfortunately for him, the Han Feng of the past, who's clueless about the coming apocalypse, is a lazy bastard who does not even have a single piece of edible food in his fridge. This was getting bad. He had never felt so hungry before. If he does not eat something soon, he will most probably pass out at any second now. He turned his attention towards the living room, where a clear jar of soybean snacks was just sitting quietly. These roasted soybeans were just some leftover snacks he got before the apocalypse. It's not exactly a complete and filling meal, but it will have to do for now. It should tide the hunger before he hits up the supermarket later. He grabbed one of the roasted soybeans, unconsciously using his right hand, momentarily forgetting that it had the mysterious green light wrapped around it. Han Feng was too hungry to think of anything else, so he tossed the soybean right into his mouth, hoping to get some type of food into his system. As soon as the bean hit his tongue, a smoky explosion occurred right in his face. The fog it created almost covered his entire upper body. Much to his surprise, he was now munching on a beanstalk. It looked as though the roasted soybean had sprouted inside his mouth. He could feel the roots on his tongue, and the stalk itself extended outward. He pulled it out, and the plant left an earthy taste in his mouth. Out of all the bizarre events he's been going through lately, this might be near the top. He was just about to snack on some roasted soybeans, and now this happens. Moreover, he does not feel tired anymore. It seems like that explosion on his face erased the hungry sensation he was feeling. Looking down at his right hand, the green light has vanished too. Maybe all of this has something to do with what happened to the soybean. He plucked one of the pods in the stalk and examined it carefully. Opening the luscious green pod, he confirmed that it was just an ordinary fresh bean sprout. Maybe this is the power that he was daydreaming about. No matter what, this is undoubtedly an incredible discovery that should be studied more. Still, he can't really research anything while worrying about dying of hunger at any moment. Right now, he has a bigger fish to fry in the form of stocking up on supplies before the end of the world. As everyone knows, for the first time in a long time, Han Feng could walk out of his apartment to feel the sun on his skin and hear the birds sing. He could walk amongst the bustling crowd of people in the commercial district, minding their own business instead of holing up in their homes, fearing the cold. Han Feng was in deep thought as he walked to his destination. Let's get this straight. First, the red glow around his hand has turned to green. The green light shrinks and grows his limbs, making his heart beat faster and super tired. When he touched the soybean snacks, it sprouted into a whole stalk. Looking at his right hand with more questions than answers, he wonders just what kind of power has been bestowed upon him by who knows who. He continued his contemplative walks casually until he heard a familiar sweet voice calling his name that would have melted him before, but would make his blood boil now. Han Feng did not realize it right away. and turned around to see who was calling him by name. It was that evil witch that got him brutally killed, Lee Hyona. She flashed her wide smile. Her makeup was on point, hiding her rotten personality. She asked if Hanfong was out shopping too. She even employed her expert witch tricks, appearing as pretty as humanly possible while commenting about how it's like fate that they ran into each other in this place. Hanfong hasn't really had the chance to digest everything that has happened yet. But seeing Lee Hyona out in the wild is starting to bring back the bitterness he held onto until his final breath. Lee Hyona used to be the goddess of his dreams for 3 long years. He was a simp that did everything in his power to make her happy. He did all that, knowing full well that he was nothing but just another fallback guy in the friend zone. No, he wasn't even in the friend zone. He was just a piggy bank. For all those years of devoting himself and his wallet to the wrong girl, he never would have thought that she would be the one that would get him killed. Before he could go out of control, Hanfeng pinched himself to stay grounded and calm. It took every bit of his willpower to do so. Thinking rationally now is not the time to take his revenge. Not yet, at least. First, he needs to take care of the supply problem, unless he wants to be miserable and hungry in the Ice Age again. Lee Hyona walked closer and waved her hand around his eyes while asking what he was spacing out for. This has never happened before. It used to be that just hearing her voice would make the poor sap swoon. Hanfeng swallowed his hatred for the witch and faked a smile as he apologized for being speechless and for how especially beautiful she looked today. She was just so radiant that he got a bit lost in the moment. Now that's more like it. Lee Hyona coyly laughed and asked when he got so smooth with his lines like that. Her lips lifted to a slight and confident smirk, thinking that he got this boy eating at the palm of her hands. So, she went for the heart kill shot with the most adorable pose in her arsenal. Lee Hyona invited Hanfeng to go shopping together, but they had run into each other anyway. Now, there is a limit to how much time Hanfeng could face her without losing control of his rage. So, he just walked on and apologized that they wouldn't be doing any shopping together today. Lee Hyona was stunned. This was not how it was supposed to go down. She was supposed to get some free stuff from a pathetic simp. While walking in the other direction, Hanfeng couldn't help but praise the girl's technique. But he won't fall for it. He won't be used as a personal ATM again. He's not that foolish anymore. So, he went straight to the spot where he could get everything he needed. Waldemar Shopping Plaza. This Waldemar in a city is the most extensive and most well-stocked supermarket in the eastern region. It's like Walmart, but that brand's copyrighted. Of course, when the Ice Age hits, this place will be cleaned out overnight. Back in the previous timeline, nobody ever found out just who did it and how. Hanfeng had already started his shopping spree and filled up one cart with goods. He needs to stock up as much as possible before society crumbles under the sheer cold. He consulted some internet forums about some generic apocalypse survival guide, and it was surprisingly helpful. Scrolling through, he listed down the things he'd need, like food, winter clothes, medicine, daily necessities, fuel, tools, transportation, and even weapons. There's a lot to prepare. But he was so pumped to get some supplies that he forgot to take the more significant problem at hand. His personal wallet's current balance was a measly 15,000 yuan, equivalent to a little more than 2,000 ist. How was he supposed to secure a safe and comfortable life in the icy apocalypse with only this much? He's going to need a lot more cash for everything that he will need. At that moment, a message notification popped up on his phone. A notification that might be Heaven's way of telling him to calm down. The message came from an organization called Money Jar Loans, congratulating him on his approved eligibility to take out a loan up to 168,000 yuan, or a little more than 23,000 USA. A light bulb dinged inside his mind. There was no need to panic when it came to funds. How could he forget that the convenience of technology had brought him an infinite money glitch? There are dozens of money-lending apps that require minimal requirements to get a loan approved for those who are desperate for cash. They're incredibly predatory, but burying himself in debt doesn't matter, as he won't have to pay them back after the apocalypse goes into full swing. Out in the commercial district, some lady was angrily kicking an empty soda can on the curb. She's obviously upset about something. It turned out to be Lee Hyona. She looks like she is not in the best mood at all. Her eyes were full of toxic vitriol as today. One of her many simps dared to refuse to take her shopping when she got all dolled up to get spoiled. She was seriously pissed off that Han Feng would just take off like that without letting her deplete his bank account like a worthless leech. She started insulting the guy in her mind for being a pathetic loser who doesn't even own a car. Lee Hyona vowed never to be nice to that simp again. Her angry walk was interrupted by some loud honking coming from the car coming up on the road. Curious, she turned around to see what's up. It looked like a brand new truck straight out of the dealership. It was still shiny and premium looking. Han Feng was lowering the windows in the driver's seat. He just pulled up to greet Hyona as he just happened to pass her by while she was doing a walk of shame along the commercial district. Seeing the new wheels, Hyona's vow to never be nice to Han Feng again has seemingly melted out of her mind. All she saw were brand new leather seats and the smell of cash. Han Feng hopped off. When asked if the car was his, he answered affirmatively, adding that he just got it earlier. She came up to the witch and made up some story about how his dad has been killing it in the United States, business-wise, so he got some cash to blow. He even added that he just got out of the airport after dropping off his old man. Lee Hyona's face lit up. The only thing that could make that happen would be the possibility of striking it rich. So, she took a deep breath and put her game face on for Han Feng. This is the second time that she's doing this today. She looked to the ground and started trembling lightly. Knowing that Han Feng took his wealthy father to the airport today, she began apologizing for asking him to go shopping without knowing that he'd have a busy schedule. Then the waterworks came down. She started summoning those tears at the perfect time while meekly telling Han Feng that he was so cold to her earlier. She thought he was ditching a good friend. Han Feng smiled with satisfaction. This academy-worthy acting would have worked wonders with the previous him, but things are different now. He could see through it all. This silly girl was a pro. He did not hesitate to hold her by the waist, pulling her closer. His other hand took hold of her chin, and they looked each other in the eye. Lee Hyona was taken aback by the fact that one of her simps was so confidently forward. Han Feng put on an acting masterclass himself, promising to never ditch her as she's way too important for him to do such a cruel thing. For a split second, there was an imperceptible twisted smile on her face, but she quickly wiped it off. Continuing with her sincere, sweet girl act, she brought out the big guns. Lee Hyona admitted that Han Feng's pretty special in her life too. She even invited him to have lunch and watch a movie today so she could get to know him better. Just as she was about to ask for his answer, Han Feng was already gone like the wind. It was the perfect, unnoticeable escape. Hyona was speechless. Her heartfelt confession was actually directed towards nothing but air. Han Feng was already tinkering with the piles of boxes in the back of his truck. He was playfully complaining about how he still has to carry so many things and how busy his schedule is. Clearly infuriated that her attack did not land, Lee Hyona tried her best to keep her sweet girl composure as she asked why he bought so much stuff. He replied that this much is nothing special. He just grabbed some things he likes. To torment the witch even further, Han Feng lied through his teeth and enthusiastically told her that he got a present for the lady too. Not wanting to overplay her hand, Lee Hyona waved goodbye as she walked in the direction of her home. She smiled and said that she was looking forward to that gift. As soon as she turned her back towards Han Feng, her supposed biggest simp, a sly smile appeared on her lips, proud of how she dealt with her piggy bank. On the other hand, Han Feng was just having fun messing with the witch. Knowing this woman, he knew that he couldn't let her find out about his little stockpile of supplies. All this stuff will be his ticket to surviving the apocalypse after all. Lee Hyona will just have to wait for her turn. Once the world ends, Han Feng will make sure that she gets what's coming to her. That mystery guy who bashed him on the head too. His anxiety about the incoming inevitable collapse of society is starting to melt. Han Feng is actually starting to look forward to what's coming now. The next day came, June 29th. Again, July 15th will be D-Day. It will be the beginning of the end. First comes the heavy snow, then the temperature will drastically plummet down to negative 20 degrees Celsius at an alarming rate. Over the next month after that, temperatures will continue to gradually drop day by day, reaching lows of up to negative 70 degrees Celsius. At that point, the world would be encased in ice and snow completely, making it almost impossible to go outside. The first thing that Han Feng secured was his bountiful food supplies. Aside from the sheer volume of stock, he also needs everything packed and sealed securely. He can't let the neighbors sense that something's going on. They can't suspect that he's hoarding copious amounts of food. This was tiring work. Some of the sensitive supplies had to be moved at night when no one was around. Han Feng doesn't trust anyone enough to help, so he has to do it on his own. Once the apocalyptic ice age starts, the power grid will be extremely unstable. That's where his newest purchase shines. A heavy-duty generator plus enough fuel to keep it running for a whole year at the very least. With power secured, he now has to consider the fatal consequence of the building's heating system stopping. He had to call in some specialized contractors to modify his home for independent heating. Han Feng also ordered some reinforced doors and windows while he was at it. He needed a dedicated room to store all the supplies that he had hoarded, so he used an empty bedroom for all the essentials. By the time he finished preparing everything listed in his little notebook of survival, it was already July 14th. Just one more day before the temperature plummets and everything descends to chaos. Next up on his list is the main event that he's been postponing out of uncertainty all this time. It is time to buckle down and actually study his mysterious ability. Han Feng made a home-cooked meal for dinner while pondering his survival in coming Ice Age apocalypse. When things get hard, relying solely on the supplies he has accumulated won't be enough. But he has a possible answer to this problem. His power to manipulate plants in some mystical way might be his only hope for a sustainable future. The meal he cooked featured soybeans as its main ingredient. That's right, the same beans he conjured from a single roasted snack using his ability. He racked his brain and tried so many gestures and possible triggers, but the lights hadn't come out yet. The activation is so random that finding the right trigger is nearly impossible. For now, it is time for a risky taste test. He needs to make sure the food conjured by his abilities is edible. Who knew that trying some beans would be so nerve-wracking? Han Feng got through half the plate of his beans with no apparent problems at all. Even the soy milk passed the taste and safety test. While chewing on his lunch, the confirmation that his ability could provide edible food was game-changing. At least this proved that he has the ability to theoretically spawn food. The next step is the harder and more trial and error based one. He needs to figure out how to actually use the red and green lights and make them appear according to his will. So far, he has only tried it on soybeans, but what would happen if he could use it on other things? Opening his newly stocked fridge, Han Feng steeled his resolve to experiment and see if his ability would work with other plants too. The testing period stretched from midday until the sun was about to set. Han Feng did not know that as he passed out in the middle of experimentation. As he slowly opened his eyes, he noticed that he was gripping something tightly in his right hand. A green vegetable of some kind. A massive broccoli. Slowly getting up from the floor, he could not be bothered by the absolute mess that was in his kitchen as the pain in his head was hellish. It felt like something was pounding from inside his skull. He has to take note of this sensation in the future. This power of his takes a severe toll on the mind and the body, and it cannot be used without restrictions unless he wants to pass out and wake up with a migraine every day. After getting up, he immediately got a spoonful of his beans to refuel again. He might have pushed himself to the limit today, but at least he learned something vital about this mysterious ability of his. A few hours ago, before he blacked out, he neatly arranged a diverse selection of produce on the kitchen floor. He tried using his power on a bunch of them after he managed to activate the green light. Some root crops like potatoes did not react to his green light at all for some unknown reason, but not all of them were duds. Some of the crops grew from the seeds into full-blown plants like the soybean stalks. Wheat was one of those, and some neither stayed the same nor grew into full-blown crops. They just exploded in his hands like mini-bombs. It was a frightening experience that caught Han Feng off guard. After those explosions, the plants would turn into a substance that looked like coal, but was very light. This development was certainly outside of his expectations. Thankfully, he could find some decent use for these inedible black substances. They are used to heat the space like coal when put together in a container and lit up. Coming from a future where heat was a luxury, Han Feng would gladly take these little balls of warmth. No more worrying about staying warm in the future. After a bunch of explosions, he tried many more times and failed most of them. He just kept chucking those black balls into the bucket one by one. When he got into some seeds he bought, he chose to take a more meditative stance while forcing himself to focus on controlling his breathing. After a few minutes of intense concentration that left him sweating bullets, he finally got the most significant success in this experiment. A gigantic broccoli shockingly appeared in his grasp. Before his eyes gave out and his consciousness went lights off, he remarked that the success rate of this method was still way too random. Then his body hit the floor. Thankfully, he was sitting on the tiles already, so the fall wasn't too bad. Now he's awake and his belly is full of beans. He played around with the broccoli while thinking long and hard and still failing to find any patterns to this ability. But he can't give up. There has to be some kind of principle behind how this ability works. There are still too many unknowns, but he made some decent progress today. At least now he has some understanding of the activating conditions of the lights. Who would have thought that the key to activating the bizarre skill lies in his very own consciousness? All he has to do is enter a meditative trance. His method involves imagining himself out in nature in his bare form, free from the constraints of human civilization. In other words, buck naked. In his mind palace, he walks on the ground with bare feet. His soul's making direct contact with the soil where life grows. Sunlight kisses his skin as all life around him harmonizes. Just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, his body and mind are both part of the natural world. A peaceful resonance of all that has life. Once he enters that state of mind, he slowly opens his eyes and a familiar green glow appears once again. This ability of his is directly connected to his consciousness. Working from that concept, he could freely call on the green light. Now that he's done with all the plant samples with a low success rate, it's time to move on to a different type of specimen. The target of the second experiment would be all kinds of meats this time around. So he slowly brought his right hand wrapped with a green light towards a juicy slab of meat. He already half expected it, but it's still disappointing that there were no reactions at all. Maybe the green light only works on plants. Thinking that the gentle approach might not be effective, Han Feng grabbed his meat and squeezed hard while praying that his right hand would work its magic. After a few minutes, he had to accept that nothing would happen. You could see the defeat and dejection in his tired eyes. That was when he thought of the sensation he felt while meditating. In a trance, he could sense two distinct colors, the red and green lights. Throughout the experiments, he hasn't tried using the red one yet. Grasping the primary trigger function of his ability, he only has to concentrate on bringing that red light out of his consciousness. While still holding the meat, he closed his eyes and tried to reach for the other ability lying dormant inside his system. After a little while, a spark of red light finally made an appearance on his right hand. With that initial spark, the glow swiftly wrapped around his hand. Surprisingly, it also wrapped around the piece of meat. It looked like it was creating some sort of bubbling reaction at the meat's surface. A few seconds of intense concentration later, Han Feng opened his eyes to a putrid pile of hardened dark red sludge that looked like it came right out of hell as the red light subsided. He immediately threw that vile thing on the ground out of sheer disgust. You would undoubtedly do that too, in his position. Realizing that this disfigured sludge might provide some valuable insights, Han Feng crouched on the ground to observe it. He poked the thing, and it was a little squishy. So, this is how meats would react to the red light. It might look revolting, but the texture and overall feel point towards the possibility that the meat got cooked or something. Was this really all the red light can do? Heat things up? Stoves and pans could do the same thing, and they could produce more appetizing meals than whatever the hell this is. Han Feng refuses to believe that's all there is to it. Upon using his consciousness to trigger his abilities a fair bit amount, he could understand his capabilities on a deeper level. If he were to describe the red light sensation, it would be like a disintegration process. His next meat experiment looked a lot better than the first one. But if that's the case, understanding the underlying concepts of these two lights might be easier than he initially thought. He grabbed a bunch of soybeans from his bean pile and gripped them hard in his right hand. In his left hand was the red light and the cooked up meat. If the green light represents the evolution of matter, then the red light is the opposite, which would be disintegration. Since he's already testing out some confusing concepts, what would happen if he combined the green light grasping beans and the red light grasping meat? The result was an even bigger reaction than he was expecting. The combination produced a bright, blinding light between his hands. When the lights died down, it was revealed that his meat got a lot bigger as a result. The meat had been supersized, but where did the soybeans in his right hand go? Could it be that the two subjects merged together, producing this giant slab? Hanfeng meticulously inspected the big meat. No matter how you look at it, it's undeniably incredible. It looks, feels, and smells exactly like real meat, but even fresher somehow, gaining some confidence that he's getting a lot better at this superpower thing. He decided to go for some more experiments. After a few hours, he was back to square one once again. His kitchen floor was filled with charred remains of meat and crops. He frustratedly threw a tantrum and everything he tried failed miserably. Getting all that exasperation out of his system, Hanfeng sat up and took a deep breath. He'll just pause the experiments for now. He can always just take his time to figure out its deeper intricacies later. Anyway, today was still a productive one, even though he ended it on a bitter and charred note. Hanfeng can already see the future if he can just successfully master this mysterious power. There's no doubt about it. With infinite resources, he would be the man standing at the pinnacle of this post-apocalyptic world. It's his dream, so he could put some sweet muscles in his image. Speaking of power, he might have forgotten one of the most important aspects of survival. Food alone is not going to cut it in the coming days. He will be completely vulnerable with all this loot if he doesn't have a decent weapon to defend himself. He swiftly took the various crops littered around his floor. He has to hurry and find himself a weapon before the temperature goes on a nosedive. Looking out the window, it seems like the initial stages of the apocalypse have already started. Snow is beginning to fall from the skies. It's here. The public might think this is just a typical snowy evening, but it's not. Just like the previous timeline, it really is happening. The collapse of modern civilization is commencing. Heading outside, Hanfeng fears that the temperatures will drop to 45 below within the week. He needs a gun and fast. But buying a gun in this country is illegal. And he doesn't exactly have any connections to the criminal world. That's when he overheard a scandalous man yelling and boasting that he's a construction guy with millions riding on every project. The dude was bragging to a passerby that he knows the infamous Lao Wang from the Shigang Lida group. They're so close. They're practically brothers. Hanfeng thinks he's seen this thug before. A dumbass with an exaggerated fashion style, blinged out with jewelry of questionable authenticity, and over-the-top streetwear. A guy who offers everyone cigarettes for some reason. Around this area, people refer to this bleached-haired, cigarette-loving thug as Homeless Joe. Homeless Joe's real name is Lai Zi. He likes it when people call him Brother Lai, and he lives in Hanfeng's neighborhood. He's reputed to be in charge of contracting projects and knows everyone around the area. If you offer him some cigs, he won't accept any other brands as he only smokes Huazi. Other brands make him cough. He's always helping his big brother with projects and looks forward to going to saunas. In reality, this bum does not have a proper job. But he always acts so busy. You often see him walking around while on a call, shouting out deals worth 20 million or 10 million as if he wants everyone to hear how successful he is. The guy is a deadbeat, but Hanfeng can see that maybe Homeless Joe has the necessary connections to get what he so badly needs. So, he approached the thug, referring to him as Brother Lai and saying that it's been a long time since they have seen each other. Hanfeng waved with an awkward smile as he was uncertain how this guy would respond. Brother Lai annoyedly asked if they knew each other as he walked closer. Being younger than Lai, he introduced himself as Xiao Han, kind of like saying little bro. He swore that they'd met a while ago, so I must have forgotten. The thug complained that he's been swamped with work lately, so he can't be blamed for his bad memory. But he was pretty receptive to talk. Hanfeng was being overly cautious as he was about to ask for something very illegal. He surveyed the area, looking from left to right to make sure that no one could hear what he was about to say. Then, he came up to Brother Lai and directly asked for the weapon that he needed to defend himself in the coming days. Lai jumped in fright and asked what he would need a gun for. That's not a good sign. Feeling like a guilty criminal, Hanfeng still had to push through this as he couldn't think of anyone else who could help him with his problem. Lai started speaking seriously, wanting to clear something up before they got any further. He insisted that his organization does not engage in any illegal activities and that guns are serious business. He hinted that he had the connections for it, but he was not one to mix ordinary people up with something dangerous. Han Feng pushed the thug's questionable Louis Vuitton bag out of his face and insisted that Brother Lai got it all twisted. He was just inquiring about some firearms for self-defense, as he has been involved in some nasty personal grudge. And so, Han Feng started lying his ass off with a story that he was making up as he spoke. According to him, one day while riding his bike to work like usual, he ran into an old man who was just spitting everywhere on the bike line. It was so gross, and to make matters worse, the wind carried one of those disgusting globs of spit right into Han Feng's face when he was just minding his own business. Angered by the revolting old man, Han Feng threw his bike to the side and confronted the old man. What did the bastard do, you ask? The asshole decided to spit on him again while he was airing out his grievance. He could not take it anymore and brought down some street justice on the disgusting old man. He gave the guy a good old beating in the middle of the road with everyone watching on the sidelines. As the old man left with his clothes tattered and his face messed up, the bastard swore that he would get back at Han Feng for this humiliation. The very next day, that old man was patched up and waiting for Han Feng on the usual bike route. This time, he had some goons with him. They beat Han Feng up quite badly and threatened to do it again if they ever saw him anywhere. His clothes were a mess. His face was bruised and his body was wounded. He has never been so humiliated in his life. That is why he wants a weapon for self-defense. That's the long and short version of it. That's the story he could come up with on the spot, and it looks like it was a very effective one. Brother Lai was fuming in anger as he imagined the nasty old jerk spitting on the road and hitting Han Feng. Such uncivilized behavior should not be tolerated. That's not really the point of Han Feng's story, but at least he's getting somewhere. Brother Lai tapped his shoulders and assured him that this vendetta would be taken care of. He assured Han Feng that he's got our boy covered. He will just make a call to his big brother right now, and they'll fetch that gun. Han Feng was starting to doubt if he made the right decision in approaching this guy. With all that tough talk, Brother Lai invited him to go to the station and hop on the bus with him. His excuse was that his Panamera was being serviced in the shop, so he couldn't drive to the headquarters. Han Feng assured him that transportation wouldn't be a problem. He has his car parked right to the side, after all. The brand new vehicle immediately caught the eye of this hype beast bum. On the drive over to his big brother, Lai could not stop going on and on about how Han Feng is living the good life and asked how much this new ride costs. It was about $700,000 of borrowed money. As he casually gave directions to turn left at the next intersection to reach the alleged office, Brother Lai kept on snapping pics of himself sitting in the new leather seats. His social media handle was Handsome Spicigai, and tonight's post was a picture of his dumbass face with a caption complaining about how his SUV seat is still too hard to sit in on, account of it being new. They pulled up to one of the seedier parts of the city. Some tough-looking guys were camped outside, complaining about the messed up weather. You can't blame them, though. It went straight from summer to hardcore winter overnight. Seeing some crisp-looking wheels pull up, everyone turned to whoever was about to exit that car. Seeing that it was Lai Z, they flocked towards him to ask what was up. Brother Lai just told them that he had some stuff to handle with Boss Liu. The other thugs assumed that the new Tiger SUV belonged to Lai and started hassling him about the price tag. Lai did not deny it at all. He even proudly boasted that he had spent 700 grand for the car. Han Feng was not upset, though. Bragging that you own the car so confidently while the actual owner is standing nearby is kind of a goated, shameless move. As soon as they entered the establishment, the one known as Boss Liu, a hardcore gangster-looking man, came out upset that Big Mouth Lai would disturb him so late in the evening. Brother Lai visibly turned a lot more reserved in front of the boss, even offering his cigs politely. The big guy does not have time for any of that filler nonsense, though. He's a busy man. Brother Lai introduced their little brother, Han Feng, as a buyer of something special, a gun. Boss Liu wanted to confirm if he heard that correctly. As soon as the big boss looked him over, Han Feng froze up in fear. He wasn't sure what would happen if he made the wrong move or said the wrong thing. Boss Liu just stared at him silently, cigarette in mouth, seemingly scrutinizing him from head to toe. Then the big guy cracked a smile. He was quite disappointed that Han Feng only needed a lousy gun when he was expecting something more interesting. He gestured towards one of his henchmen, Cheng Rumman 11. The henchman already knew what to do and rummaged through his jacket pocket. He tossed a pistol on the table, and Boss Liu quoted a price, 6,000 for the handgun. Easy to conceal and reliable. Han Feng humbly rejected it as he was thinking more along the lines of something a little longer and bigger. He was not looking for some low-caliber pea shooter. He wanted something that requires a scope to fire. Boss Liu's expression turned grave as he stared at Han Feng intently. Our boy might have crossed the line unknowingly. He immediately shut up as if he just swallowed his tongue. The big guy started yelling about how unrealistic it is to demand a freaking sniper rifle like it was nothing. He's running a discreet business here. This is not some goddamn shopping mall where you get to pick and choose what kind of illegal product you get. Boss Liu's final offer is the pistol on the table. Take it or leave it. Brother Lai had to run some interference to try to calm the boss down. His idea of convincing the big guy to listen was to invent a backstory for Han Feng on his own. A made-up story that allegedly happened 5 years ago involving Han Feng's non-existent wife. Lai is quite a mouthy but talented storyteller. Under the relentless downfall of snow, the boss listened to his lies all the way to the end. The story must have been phenomenal as Boss Liu was so angered that he almost snapped the table in half. He kept repeating how disgusting those who had wronged Han Feng were. Apparently Han Feng had 3 kids with a non-existent wife, but it turned out that none of them were his. Han Feng just stood there and went with all the lies. Even for someone nicknamed Homeless Joe, this ridiculous story was too over the top, but it worked. Boss Liu gave his personal guarantee that Han Feng would get his sniper rifle as soon as possible. He promised that he would personally make it happen, but it might take a few days. Once again, the henchman Changzi will be arranging everything. Boss Liu wanted something semi-automatic with loads of ammo too so Han Feng could have what he needed. It's unexpected, but Brother Lai definitely came in clutch. The big guy also handed Han Feng the handgun. He wanted to give it for free. A gift from one man to another. Han Feng was speechless. The made-up story was so good that the boss had formed some kind of one-sided bond with him. Now that it was taken care of, the big guy got back on his phone to take care of his other, more pressing businesses. Before leaving, Han Feng wanted to return the favor a little bit. He stated that a buddy of his who works for the government had told him that due to the abnormal weather, purchase limits for supplies will be implemented soon, so it's best to stock up before that happens. Seeing the serious look in the young man's eyes, as if he actually knew what he was talking about, Boss Liu could not help but take the tip seriously too. He nodded in understanding and remarked that he got it. And so, Brother Lai and Han Feng exited the center of the city's underbelly with one firearm secured. On the way back, Lai could not stop bragging about how he handled business like a boss, and it went beautifully. Now that his big brother, the big boss, is in a good mood, they could even ask that guy for a cannon and he'd say yes. Han Feng wanted to thank the thug by buying him some cigarettes. Brother Lai tried to be humble and insisted that he did what he did just to help him, but he would gladly take about 7 to 8 cartons of his beloved Huazi cigs. He even promised to take Han Feng to a sauna once he got paid for his so-called project. Our boy was already thinking about his next logical move. Supplies are secured and the weapon is obtained. He should be set for the early days of the apocalypse at the very least. He can focus on studying his abilities. Fully solving the food problem would make his long-term survival chances skyrocket. He was so absorbed in his own world while walking that he didn't notice an icy part on the ground and slipped. Han Feng was so concerned with survival that he failed to follow one of the ironclad rules in the upcoming Ice Age. Do not get injured. He fell quite badly. His leg must have absorbed the impact of the slip and had been damaged severely. Brother Lai didn't know what to do as he ran towards his new pal's side. This is bad. From the sharp pain he was feeling and the awkward landing, there was a very real possibility that his leg was broken. He shakily took his car keys out, handed them over to Brother Lai and requested to be taken to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. Lai just scratched the back of his head and admitted that he actually doesn't have a driver's license, insisting that he can't drive without one. But it's safe to say that this bum just can't drive. Period. At least he didn't leave Hanfeng on the floor to writhe in the pain of a broken leg. He offered his shoulders to lift Hanfeng up, but he struggled hard to do so. Both of them wouldn't make it to the hospital alive at this rate, so Hanfeng just called a taxi that he had to pay for since Lai is a broke bastard. Even the hospital, an essential establishment, was starting to freeze over under the intensifying blizzard. In the nurse's office, someone named Jian was left to take care of the night shift on this whiteout night. The snow was getting heavier and the roads were starting to get buried deep. Head nurse Jian had only just started her night shift, but calls coming from the hall were already flooding in as the emergency section was severely short-staffed. The pretty nurse had no other choice but to step up. Upon getting an X-ray in the hospital, it was confirmed that he had really broken his leg. The doctor explained that there was a stable fracture on his right tibia. It would be easy to set, but he'd need to stay for an hour of observation before going home with his meds. This accident could not have happened at a worse time. It just had to occur before the apocalypse went into full swing. While looking at his X-ray results, Hanfeng regretted being so careless. Brother Lai accompanied him for most of the process, but the dude had to leave as he apparently had a few deals to handle. He's a real one though, and he even left his number in case Hanfeng needed anything else. Now that he was alone in the hospital lobby, Hanfeng sighed heavily. He wondered how he could make such a stupid mistake at such a crucial time. Looking at the chaos around him was stressful. The hospital quickly overflowed with patients, victims of accidents caused by the sudden blizzard and quickly plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds lined the hallways as a grim testament to the worsening conditions outside. As for him personally, he just wanted to get his meds and leave this place as fast as possible before the roads closed for good. Thankfully, his idle time would not be boring as a goddess had just walked right in front of him. Head nurse Jian had come to bolster the understaffed emergency room. The first bed she checked had a patient with heavy wounds. Next on her rotation was bed 5, where a patient's wounds had just been cleaned. Thankfully, the vitals were stable. Bed 5 just needed another dose of glucose in 10 minutes. She advised the attending nurse that if the patient's heart rate dropped below 80, epinephrine must be administered immediately. Throughout the rounds of the head nurse, Hanfeng could not take his eyes off her. She was just amazing. Being a head nurse at such a young age, she must be a generational talent. On top of that, he saw how she dealt with all kinds of patients. She was kind and incredibly skilled. She looked like a radiant being in the middle of a hopeless place. Moreover, she was incredibly beautiful. She was working the hectic night shift, but her smile never faltered. She was basically an angel. He was so enamored that his eyes accidentally traveled to some ungentlemanly areas. Hanfeng immediately averted his gaze out of respect. But head nurse Jian was just way too unaware of her surroundings. A real airhead. Suddenly, the old man sitting beside him started calling the attention of the pretty head nurse. She was not really required to tend to the patients outside of her rounds, but she still took the call with a smile. Head nurse Jian politely apologized to the old man and asked if she could come back a bit later to help, as she still needed to provide urgent care to some patients to cover for the staff shortage. The old man complained that his back hurt too much. He explained that the back pain had been worsening lately and wanted the head nurse to take a look to see what was causing it. In reality, this bastard was just a dirty perv trying to film below her skirt. Not noticing what was really happening, Jian just smiled and apologized once again, saying that for such back problems, they might need to schedule an X-ray just to be sure. The old perv started getting pushy, urging her to just take a quick look as he pointed to where it hurt. The bastard even got up from his seat to touch the angelic nurse inappropriately. Being the airhead that she usually was, Jian just laughed as she was naturally ticklish. For back problems, it's really advisable to wait for the resident physician's exam. The perv started pushing it, his hand crawling even lower from her waist. This disgusting act would have continued longer if something or someone had not made it stop. A freaking flying crutch forcefully smashed against the old perv, giving him some real back pain and knocking the phone away from his hands. Ever the kind-hearted healthcare worker, Jian wanted to check if the old man was. Thankfully, Hanfeng came to her rescue, humbly apologizing for his crutch flying to the side, as this was the first time he was using one. He bent over and went straight for the old perv's phone while blatantly questioning if it was broken or not. Just as he was about to touch it, the perv started sweating nervously and screaming at him to stay away from the phone. Han Feng did not listen. He walked all the way to the side of the room, got his bandage all messed up, and wouldn't let this freaking lecher get away with doing something so disgusting. As soon as he opened the phone, his suspicions were proven right. He looked at the creep directly in the eyes. If looks could kill, the geezer would have died by now. The proof was already there on the home screen. This perv had some nerve filming up a hard-working nurse's skirt and even assaulting her. There's no good reason why Han Feng shouldn't call security and have them escort the bastard to a jail cell where criminals love putting pervs in their place. Han Feng would be keeping the phone, and the next time he saw this old creep again, he threatened to ruin his miserable and revolting life. The old bastard knew he had no other choice but to flee and never show himself near this place again, and it infuriated him. The first chance he got up from that hospital floor and bolted out of the door like his life depended on it. Meanwhile, head nurse Jaeon was just confused as to how someone complaining about severe back pain could run so fast. Han Feng was shocked to see a first-hand display of the most comically naive person he had ever met. He decided to show her what the old fart was doing with the phone, filming up her skirt. Based on her reaction, she really did not notice anything wrong going on. Han Feng handed her the phone with the video footage, so she could decide whether to wipe it or call the cops on the owner. He also reminded her to be more careful, so people like that perv wouldn't take advantage of her kindness. She smiled with the brightness of 1,000 stars, and then asked if Han Feng's leg was supposed to be injured. The adrenaline from catching that old perv in the act must have numbed the pain from his broken leg. But now that it was dealt with, the pain came rushing back in, and he screamed in agony. Thankfully, head nurse Jaeon was an expert when it came to mending these types of injuries, and quickly set the casting back in place. She looked at him and asked if it still hurt. Han Feng thanked her for dealing with his broken leg, and now it didn't hurt at all. At that moment, it was as if only the two of them existed in the crowded room. Jaeon returned the gratitude as she promised to never let such bad guys get away with messing with her anymore. She would punch them really well from now on. Han Feng just wanted her to be more aware of her surroundings. Seeing as she was letting his broken leg and feet touch her front pillows, it seemed like she had not learned anything at all. She was still as clueless and unaware as ever. While Han Feng's head was in the clouds, another nurse called for Jaeon as her help was needed on the emergency beds. Before going back to her rounds, the angelic head nurse reminded him not to forget to come back in a week to get his leg checked again. Han Feng promised that he would, but making any plans a week from now was unrealistic. He just smiled helplessly, for only he knew what was really going on in the world. He took the crutch that he smashed against the old perv and limped his way out of the hospital. Han Feng just accepted the fact that he wouldn't be able to see her ever again. The next day came, and the blizzard had not stopped. It had gotten even stronger instead. It had essentially frozen all infrastructure and services, making just going outside a dangerous challenge. On the morning news, emergency weather reports kept coming in about how, within the next 24 hours, all regions of the country would be experiencing heavy snowfall and a sharp drop in temperatures. Bizarre reports from overseas correspondents showed that temperatures were plummeting in every corner of the world. Dubai, Egypt, the Amazon basin, and places that should not be experiencing this type of phenomenon were seeing their landmasses buried in thick blankets of snow. The nation's experts, along with specialists from 46 other countries, were rushing to the United Nations to discuss the cause of the anomalous weather. Every network kept echoing that the experts said this severe cold snap wouldn't last too long. They always ended their news reports with a public service announcement to pay attention to disaster warnings and follow arrangements made by the local government. They kept reminding citizens to remain calm, avoid spreading or believing in unfounded rumors, and refrain from hoarding supplies and panic buying, as the disaster would soon pass. Warm, cozy, and sipping wine inside his decked-out home, Han Feng clicked his tongue. The government and media just kept lying through their teeth, feeding the public BS to maintain order. If he hadn't died and come back to life already, he might even believe them. But this time was different. He was well prepared for everything that was about to come. Supplies were fully stocked. The house was reinforced, and the heating system was working flawlessly. He had been so well prepared that there was nothing to worry about for the immediate future. His phone started buzzing incessantly with messages from the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat, discussing the weird weather and how the snow was already making the roads unusable. Everyone was clearly clueless about what was happening, but not the member nicknamed Mysterious Person. Whoever this was demanded everyone's attention to inform them that the snowstorm wasn't caused by normal weather patterns, but by something within the Earth itself. Mysterious Person proclaimed that everyone should heed his words as the Ice Age apocalypse was about to begin. No one was more shocked after reading those messages than Han Feng. Who the hell is this mysterious person, and how do they know anything about the apocalypse? After seeing the enigmatic messages from the mysterious person in the housing complex group chat, Han Feng made a mental note to be mindful of this guy. Meanwhile, the rest of the residents were complaining and demanding the property management team do something about the snow buildup. Most of them were starting to run out of supplies and were worried that the supermarkets would be emptied out. At this point in time, the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat was like an amusement park hinging on a very delicate balance. Most tenants were putting pressure on the property agents to get out and give them an explanation for why they couldn't restock essentials due to the inaccessibility of roads. The property management team was not even at fault here, but they still apologized for not being able to take any steps on account of the raging disaster. An admission of incapability made the tenants even more aggressive. Thinking that the management was useless, they demanded that the team refund their fees. Han Feng was in the middle of this heated discussion. He knew that this was a completely meaningless fight, as the snowstorm wasn't something humans could deal with. Thankfully, another person stood out from the crowd. His voice to stop the fighting pierced through the loud chaos. It was the glasses-wearing owner of Unit 61111204. He explained that with the snowstorm being so heavy, clearing it out would be useless as it would build up again after a few hours. So instead of fighting, maybe everyone could help clear it out. If they had done that, instead of bickering, they would have been able to go out long ago. He added that the property management team was just humans. They were also helpless in front of an abnormal natural disaster. He asked the tenants if they were just looking for someone to take their frustrations out on. The angry mob immediately turned on him for lecturing them about decency. They even accused the Glasses guy of being one of the useless members of the property management team. Glasses cleared up that he was not speaking on behalf of the property management team. He was just speaking objectively and realistically. Pushing management into a corner would be meaningless and would only prolong the problem. It wouldn't get them the result everyone desired. Now that he put it like that, the people turned to Glasses for the next move. He asserted that with the current conditions, driving a car to the supermarket would be impossible. Even if they cleared the neighborhood's snow, the main roads outside might be unusable. He suggested clearing footpaths and walking over for supply runs. Han Feng couldn't quite put a finger on it, but he seemed to have some recollection of this Glasses guy, owner Zhang. In the previous life, he was a very lively person. You could see his charisma working on the group chat. Some of the tenants agreed with Zhang's suggestions, thinking that they shouldn't complicate the matter. Those who wanted to go out should clear the roads. Those who didn't should just shut up. Fighting and acting immaturely in the chat for half a day just to clear some snow was very annoying. Once everyone realized that what they were doing was cringe, the GC finally quieted down. Another person stepped up to volunteer in the clearing operation. He said he needed to hit the roads to go to his brother to discuss business worth a few million. Han Feng might not have seen a profile picture or a voice message, but that guy's manner of speaking seemed very similar to that of some gangster he knew. As soon as the first volunteer stepped up, more and more people raised their hands to join the operation. As most of them were running out of food, there was even a dazzling young lady who would brave the snowstorm, even though she was a little weaker than an average person. As for that witch, Lai Heiana claimed that she had the flu over the past 2 days, but she would still love to go down and help with the neighborhood. Han Feng was unimpressed, to say the least. He might be the only one who could see through the good girl act. Most of the men in this neighborhood knew her and would fawn over her. Some white knight immediately butted in and insisted on volunteering for her sake, when a decent amount of her fans stepped up to the plate. She thanked them for going through the trouble of cleaning up a footpath. Tired of this BS, Han Feng got out of that group chat with annoyance. But he had to admit that when it came to putting on an act, Hyun was really an expert. With just a few taps of a button, she could manipulate multiple men to do her bidding. As for Han Feng, Lee Hyuna was using a little more personal touch. She had been bugging him to chat. Ultimately, she just wanted him to get her some food from the supermarket if he was going. She really was a master of her craft. Her innocent request was accompanied by a cute photo in her bed. She even had her feet in the frame for all the freaks out there. Han Feng was actually very impressed with the commitment. In these catastrophic weather conditions, the witch was still wearing so little to try and seduce him. She could really turn a lot of men into errand boys with that. Now was the fun part. Han Feng could reply to her advances however he wanted. Well, whatever he sent back must have been some awful crap, as Lee Hyuna tossed her phone and stepped on it hard in anger and annoyance as soon as she saw it. Today would make it the third official day since the snowfall started. The temperature had reached -20. This could be regarded as the early stage of the apocalypse, a time when most buildings of decent quality still had central heating systems running. They still had the internet, and everyone was still going on with their daily lives as usual. They just needed to stay inside, just like COVID times. Han Feng had been scrolling through videos and TikToks to pass his time as well. Based on his page, it looked like we had a certified man of culture. It had only been a few days, and he was already getting bored with the mindless indoor activities. It looked like his most significant problem in this apocalypse would be learning how to endure loneliness. It also didn't help that his leg was a broken mess. A broken bone would need at least a few months to completely recover. Just like us, Han Feng's boredom always led back to watching videos on the internet. He came across a gruesome broadcast in the scientific column about a man who got into a brutal accident. After doctors sewed up the man who jumped from the 15th floor, they discovered that his damaged internal organs and bones started regenerating. This clickbait news story gave Han Feng an idea. It's one that he really should have come up with a lot earlier. Why had he not thought of using his newfound powers on himself? He activated the green light in his right hand and carefully touched his broken leg with it. After a few seconds of nothing happening, the green light started dissipating. Han Feng refused to believe that it was a bust, so he tried again. He activated the green light harder than he did before. But just like earlier, the light eventually died down with no change in his leg. It looked like he was just overthinking things. He really thought that the green light would be able to help his injury recover faster. But it seemed like the only thing it brought was irresistible sleepiness. Han Feng eventually succumbed to the heaviness of his eyes and took a nap on the couch. He woke up to some freaky-ass ceremony that involved goats and Native American headdresses. Under the transcendent light of the night skies, Han Feng rode on the back of giant goats with a bloody whip in his hands. Goat heads flew alongside him. In this freaky ceremony, Han Feng is riding at the forefront of a goat herd on top of a bloody red grassland. There are totem poles scattered along the land, and he is having fun whipping his whip all around the place. Well, that fun only lasts for a minute before he is tossed off the goat's back and into the herd. He eventually lands on the blood-red grassland, and he lands badly. His foot is at an awkward angle and a crack can be heard. It makes him shiver in pain. To come from the absolute freedom of riding goats in the grassland to being immobile on the ground is quite jarring. To make matters worse, one of the goats starts licking his broken leg. Disgusted, Han Feng tries his hardest to shoo the goat away from him and his unfortunate injury. He pushes the goat over and over again until the animal finally snaps. It extends its tongue like a frog, wrapping that slimy piece around his affected leg. Then the goat raises its head and Han Feng's whole body comes along helplessly. While feeling the slimy saliva running down his leg, he also starts feeling the warmth of the green light wrapping around his injury. Han Feng eventually wakes up from that bizarre nightmare that involves a lot of goats. He is sweating and screaming. The dream is just too immersive, while he labors to catch his breath. He wonders just what caused that hideously messy dream. Well, the answer presents itself quite loudly. His broken right leg still has some leftover green light aura surrounding it. Furthermore, Han Feng senses a certain lightness in his limbs. He promptly takes off the bandage wrapping around his injury and tosses it to the side. Han Feng excitedly steps on the floor and carefully puts more weight on his right leg. He is pleased and surprised to confirm that the injury does not hurt anymore. He is fully healed for some reason. This should mean that the green light could also help with self-recovery, right? But could the healing process only take place while he's sleeping? There is only one way to find out, and that's by trying it out again in a localized body part. He shakily takes the sharpest kitchen knife he has and slowly puts it up against his other hand. Stealing his resolve, Hanfeng cannot even watch while the blade's edge touches his flesh. He only needs a little prick, but the wound he makes on his fingertip flows quite freely with blood. Not wasting another second with a bleeding wound, Hanfeng calls upon the green light to do its thing. Upon seeing the healing process up close and personal, Hanfeng smiles to himself. He understands now. He has a real survival game changer in his hands. Outside the building, those who volunteered to clear up a footpath diligently worked together for the good of the community. Glasses Guy thanks everyone for participating in this difficult manual work. This Mr. Perfect even singles out the oldest of the bunch, Uncle Liu, and politely apologizes for all the trouble. Zhang Zuyu really knows what to say in any situation. Uncle Liu Guangyao just laughs and insists that he didn't do much as most of the actual work was done thanks to the Jin brothers. Those two, Jin Qinwen and Jin Qinwu, really went all out for the clearing operation. Some real hard workers. While they are busy finishing up the final touches, a young lady wearing a thick pink coat slips on the ice. The Jin brothers immediately rush toward the lady to check if she's okay, and remind her to be more careful. This pink girlie is known as Jin Jian. She's a real doer, unlike that witch Lai Huna, who didn't even leave her room after playing sick. The Jin brothers still have a lot to do, so they just remind Jin Jian to call for them if she needs help. She assures them that she'll be fine. Well, the snow is getting heavier. Those who are planning to buy some supplies later will have to move quickly. Speaking of supplies, Uncle Liu is reminded of something that he noticed a few weeks ago. Uncle Liu stops himself from babbling, thinking that what he has to say wouldn't be anything significant. But Zhang Zuyu curiously presses him on. The old man has been hearing that for the past few days or weeks. An owner in the neighborhood has been bringing back supplies on a small truck, like he's moving houses. Zhang Zuyu thinks that this is a common sight, as there are always people moving into the neighborhood and houses undergoing renovations. But Uncle Liu got different vibes from this one. He saw gas tanks and a whole fireplace being shipped in. It's not normal for someone to move in or anything like that. It's just a hunch. But Uncle Liu thinks that the person was making preparations to get through a harsh winter. This conversation is interrupted by the Jin brothers, who have just finished clearing the main path. People should be able to go out now. Uncle Liu promptly thanked them for going all out. But unbeknownst to everyone, there's another tenant listening in from earlier. He heard talks about making preparations for the winter, and his morbid interest has been piqued. This weirdo is quickly neutralized by a snowball landing on the back of his head. Wu Kuanyu is brought down a peg by this gorgeous woman, Liu Yan. The weirdo tries to argue that he's been doing everything alone since earlier, and she's just been watching from the side. But Liu Yan just dismisses him as an unruly child. Zhang Zuyu breaks up the fight between the two and informs them that the main path has been cleared and is now good to go. This means that the volunteers can stop shoveling and get ready to head out to the supermarket for supplies instead. Looking at their shopping list, it seems like the Jin brothers have a lot to buy. They even want to buy some for their mom, thinking that she's going to need it. These two are good sons. For someone who didn't want to share the story earlier, Uncle Liu seems way too curious about Zhang Zuyu's thoughts on the matter of that tenant who brought in a ton of supplies. Truthfully speaking, Zhang Zuyu doesn't feel too concerned about hearsay. He still believes what the government and the authorities say, that this is just a brief snowstorm that will stop very soon. They only need to endure for a bit. Then they can return to normal. So, he's not too worried about those mysterious deliveries. But even if they step back and assume that this snowstorm is here to stay if someone in the neighborhood is hoarding a massive stockpile of resources, isn't that a good thing for everyone? Uncle Liu immediately understands what Zhang Zuyu is implying. He praises the young one for being brainy. Under the ruthless snowfall with no signs of stopping, Zhang Zuyu leads some of the tenants to the supermarket. He makes sure that everyone queues up properly. With the snow getting heavier, they need to try and get back within 3 hours. If they get past the 3-hour mark, who knows if they'll even have a road to walk back on. While those brave souls enter the unknown and endure the harsh environment, Han Feng is passed out in his warm and cozy living room, drooling on himself. He would have stayed holed up on this couch forever with all the soda and junk food to tide him over the dull day, if not for the annoying voice calling him to the door. Han Feng lazily opens his door. He wipes the sleep from his eyes and sees Brother Lai. Well, the smooth-talking gangster has come in clutch once again. Hidden inside a big bag is a semi-automatic rifle complete with a proper crosshair. It's precisely what Han Feng wanted. This was the promised gift from Boss Liu. Brother Lai had agreed to bring it because he had stocked up on supplies beforehand and could now afford not to run around the city like crazy looking for supplies like most of the other citizens. But even so, Han Feng was grateful to him for coming in this weather. Brother Lai also had some very interesting information that various rumors had already started to spread about. Last night, some unknown person had cleaned out the shelves of a supermarket in the Eastern District. And when the Boss Liu gang cleared their way out of the snow yesterday, they were met with nothing but emptiness in the supermarket. To Han Feng, something like this seemed unbelievable. To completely clean out a huge supermarket in one night, who could be capable of such a thing? However, there was no doubt in Brother Lai's words, and it had definitely happened. Han Feng was now beginning to realize that something even stranger than in his previous life was happening around him. It looked like he wasn't the only one who had gained superpowers. For a second, his thoughts were interrupted by Brother Lai. He advised Han Feng to wear more warm clothes and be careful. After that, he said goodbye and left. Finally, our hero could be alone and think things over. He kept trying to think of a logical explanation for what had happened last night. How could someone clean out a supermarket in one night? The only explanation he could think of was the theory that it could have been done by someone with superpowers from novels and comic books. Someone capable of hiding unlimited amounts of supplies in his personal subspace. The only question was, could people with such abilities exist in this world? And the answer to that question was quite simple. Since he himself had superpowers, someone else could too. This was a disturbing discovery. Now Han Feng couldn't waste a moment. He needed to examine his superpowers more thoroughly, so that when he encountered other superpower holders, he would have his own strategy to counter them. He simply had to know his strengths and weaknesses, as well as the limit of his superpowers. To do so, he opened his diary. His words naturally instilled fear in everyone who heard them. Returning to the group chat, where all the residents of our hero's apartment are gathered, Old Man Liu reiterated that the military was likely preparing for war given the mobilization of military vehicles in the city. Naturally, everyone panicked upon hearing this news. Their resource situation is already dire, and now the threat of war looms, which would only exacerbate the scarcity. At that moment, Zhang steps in, suggesting that if the old man's prediction is accurate, they must take immediate measures for their survival. The government, likely overwhelmed by the crisis, won't have the capacity to aid everyone in need. The man with glasses notes that some neighbors have already depleted their food supplies due to insufficient stockpiling. Furthermore, there is no confirmed timeline for the arrival of government aid. He proposes that they should begin by organizing themselves and assisting the owners who are struggling. With determination, he asserts that those with ample food supplies should donate some of their own to those who have run out. Zhang announces that this charity will begin with him, boldly stating he will donate half of his food supplies to anyone in need. This astonishing declaration from Four Eyes elicits mixed reactions from the crowd, mostly positive. While they remain skeptical of his generosity, his public proclamation lends it some credibility. Ku voices his support for Zhang's idea, stating that everyone in the neighborhood should help each other to get through this crisis together. They can't allow some families to starve in such cold weather. He also announces his own participation in the donation and asks Yona if she will contribute as well. Behind the scenes, Yona is losing her patience with Ku for putting her on the spot. This greedy woman doesn't want to waste any of her supplies on others, but she can't reveal her true feelings because it would ruin her reputation. So she puts on an act, claiming she can't spare any donations because she's in a difficult situation herself. Not surprisingly, some of her admirers quickly come to her defense, urging Ku to back off. This only angers him, leading him to declare that he would cease his donations if people could not ensure unity among themselves. This interaction caused the community to split into factions, those willing to help others and those who did not, and those focused on self-preservation. After a lengthy discussion and much contemplation, unity ultimately prevailed. Inspired by Zhang, many individuals began offering their surplus goods to those in need, including medicine, clothes, food, and other essential items. As a result, Zhang was deeply touched by the cooperation of his neighbors. He expressed his thanks to the generous contributors, appreciating their understanding. With many people now eager to assist, he proposed appointing individuals to oversee the donations. He suggested forming a temporary emergency committee responsible for organizing and managing the donated supplies. Unsurprisingly, Zhang already envisioned himself as the head of this committee. Meanwhile, Han Fong couldn't help but laugh at this naive effort to help one another, recalling a similar situation from his previous life. As we anticipated, it was all a scheme to seize others' resources. Today, July 19th, marks the 5th day of the icy apocalypse. The temperature outside has plummeted to -40 degrees. The central heating system has failed due to the extreme cold, and everyone is now focused on finding ways to stay warm and maintain their body heat. This situation mirrors our boy's past life, convincing him that things will only deteriorate further from here. Everyone will struggle to cope with the unexpected crisis, everyone except Han Fong. While the others conserve their energy to maintain body heat and avoid freezing, Han Fong leisurely enjoys dessert and even sips ice-cold drinks. Thanks to his excellent heating system, he is clearly enjoying himself, energetically shifting on his couch while playing video games. Suddenly, Han Fong's phone rings. Answering the call, he is informed that as the person in charge of Block 8, he and his team will need to head out to clear the roads in 20 minutes. He is told that once he is finished with his task, he must go down to the basement car park. This directive infuriates Han Fong. The snow outside is so heavy that the last thing he wants is to venture out into the cold. He wishes he could argue with the man on the phone, but knows that doing so would attract unnecessary attention. Thus, in the next scene, we find a reluctant Han Fong in the main lobby's first floor. He has no choice but to comply with those in charge to avoid unwanted animosity. Additionally, he knows he must minimize the risk of anyone discovering his secrets. As they step outside, the volunteers notice that the entrance on the first floor is completely blocked by snow. Just yesterday, they had cleared the pavement, but now all their efforts have been undone, leaving them in a worse situation. Two of the volunteers ask our hero for help in pushing the snow-blocked door. From his expression, it's clear he isn't keen on this futile task, but he has no other choice. The three men lean against the door, and on the count of 3, they put all their strength into pushing it open. Through their combined efforts, the three managed to open the door. And as soon as it swung open, a bone-chilling gust of wind swept into the apartment complex. The intense cold made everyone shiver uncontrollably, but of course, our hero was the only one prepared for such frigid conditions. The cold was so severe that it was difficult to even keep their eyes open. Our protagonist quickly ducked down and curled up to conserve as much body heat as possible. Initially hesitant to venture downstairs, he now had no desire to step outside at all. With the risk of severe frostbite in this weather, staying inside seemed like the only sensible option. Things could get even worse, possibly resulting in death. Fortunately, our protagonist isn't the only one who had this thought. The others have also started voicing their frustrations about the seemingly impossible task they've been assigned. Now, nearly everyone is protesting against clearing the path. Suddenly, a familiar voice breaks through the commotion, announcing the arrival of someone. Han Fong reacts with a start at the sound of the voice, and his earlier expression of despair fades away. The voice belongs to none other than Brother Lai, our favorite KH artist. He strides into the room with an air of arrogance, questioning why everyone is acting like cowards. Han Fong immediately realizes that Lai's arrival is unlikely to bring good news. He will undoubtedly urge everyone to clear the path, but the others are unwilling to act in such harsh weather. Without a second thought, they politely inform Lai that moving in this intense cold is impossible and suggest waiting until the snow lightens up. Unfortunately, Lai doesn't pay much attention. He remains undeterred, with his usual confidence. He dives into the snow and begins digging. Despite his vigorous efforts, flailing his arms back and forth, his attempts are largely ineffective. He managed to dig a hole big enough for himself and went straight through it. After a while, he started screaming for help, having become stuck in the thick layer of snow. The hole was too narrow for him to reposition or turn around, leaving him unable to get back out. The others had to pool their efforts to rescue the foolish con man. By the time they extracted him from the snow, his complexion had already turned purple, and he was perilously close to freezing to death. They quickly shut the door to keep out the biting wind. If Brother Lai gained anything from his ordeal, it was a clear demonstration of how impossible it is to clear a path through such conditions. Our boy quickly tended to Lai, keeping him warm, and then asked if he was all right. Noting the condition of Brother Lai, Han Fong suggested that everyone head to the car park to find the person in charge and sign in. After that, they could decide what to do once the snow stopped. Our boy pointed out that the severe snowstorm made the situation too challenging to be resolved with just manpower. In the parking lot, a crowd had gathered around Zhang. The reasonable man acknowledged that the snow was too heavy to clear a path at the moment and proposed waiting for the storm to subside before taking any action. He also mentioned that the basement parking area would serve as the designated point for donations and resource collection. Our onlooker observes Zhang and realizes that he might be the person who frequently dominates the group chat. He has now identified Zhang as the mastermind behind the scam committee in both his previous life and the present one. Meanwhile, Zhang keeps up his guise as a concerned citizen, expressing gratitude for everyone's steadfast support. It dawns on me where I've seen this devious individual before. He's a dead ringer for Aizen from Bleach. Both shrewd and strategic, he admits he was genuinely surprised by how many owners were willing to contribute their resources. He believes their generous donations will provide significant assistance to other owners facing tough situations. As a result, he feels he can never fully express his gratitude. Many people are touched by Zhang's plight and argue that everyone faces challenges at some point, so it's only fair to support one another, especially if they stand united. They are confident that together they can overcome this crisis. However, our protagonist remains skeptical of their optimistic outlook. Having faced severe difficulties in his past life, he already understands that they will come to regret participating in grand schemes. Meanwhile, Brother Lai, who is still shivering from the cold, informs our boy that he will be returning to his room first. Our boy says his goodbyes as Brother Lai departs. As Brother Lai leaves, our boy's gaze falls upon a particular individual. She is a cheerful girl with pink hair and eyes. Han Fong immediately remembers that she is the nurse he met earlier. True to her diligent and caring nature, Nurse Jin is seen carrying a large box. Given her personality, it's likely she's here to donate some of her resources. Nurse Jin, being her usual clumsy self, accidentally bumps into a few people and loses her balance. Luckily, our hero manages to catch her just in time. Judging by Jin's expression, it seems she resigned herself to the fall, closing her eyes and bracing for impact. After steadying herself, she turns around to thank her rescuer and immediately recognizes our hero. She's taken aback to see that his leg is fully healed enough for him to catch her. Our hero, however, is too surprised to respond to Jin's questions about his leg. He hadn't anticipated meeting her again, leaving him at a loss for how to explain the situation. In a frantic bid to justify his swift recovery, he insists that his healing has always been exceptional since childhood, claiming he can bounce back from minor injuries and illnesses in just a few days. Unsurprisingly, the trusting nurse accepts his story without hesitation, marveling at his purported rapid recovery. Eager to steer the conversation away from his injury, Han Fong offers to help carry Jin's package. At first, the nurse politely refuses, not wanting to impose, but our hero insists, saying it's his way of repaying her for taking such good care of him. Han confidently claims that he's strong and can easily handle the package. However, when Nurse Jin hands it over, he nearly collapses under its weight. Trying to maintain his composure, he asks what's inside the box. Nurse Jin explains that it's mostly medical supplies, and she's planning to donate them to those in need. She then inquires if the package is too heavy and offers to take it back if necessary. Despite Han Fong's clear struggle, all the weariness melts away at the sight of the nurse's sweet smile. Jin then mentions that she's actually stronger than most guys, so it's perfectly fine for him to let her handle the boxes. Han Fong, however, isn't immediately convinced about handing over the package, but he's genuinely curious if Jin has always been this strong. The nurse blushes and looks down, admitting that she wasn't particularly strong as a child and that there's a reason behind her current strength. As she fidgets with her hands, she confesses it's something she can't quite explain. She quickly shifts the topic, asking him for his name. As she reflects on it, she realizes they never really had the opportunity to get to know each other. Blushing, Han Fong introduces himself. In response, the nurse offers him a heartwarming smile and introduces herself as Jin Soo. As they walk together, they chat casually about their lives and work. Suddenly, someone bumps into Jin, causing her to stumble and fall into Han Fong, pressing her large package against his arms. Nurse Jin quickly recoils, apologizing for her clumsiness. Han Fong doesn't really mind. If asked, he'd actually prefer they stayed like this a bit longer. Suddenly, Huna appears from behind and calls out to him. She mentions that he didn't let her know he'd be here, and then wraps her arm around his, pressing close. With a sly look, she questions if Jin is his. Her eyes flash with the look of someone who's just had their toys snatched away. Noticing Huna's hostility, Jin decides to step back, apologizing for interrupting their moment. Huna swiftly takes the boxes from his hands and walks off. As he watches Jin dash away, our boy turns to Huna and asks her about her plans. The shrewd witch explains that she came to the parking lot to pick up some supplies, and since he hadn't reached out to her earlier, she's also concerned that something might have gone wrong. Trying to talk his way out of the situation, our boy scratches his head and claims he was just about to send her a message. However, Huna isn't convinced and becomes a bit jealous of Nurse Jin, noting that he seemed to be enjoying a chat with her. Shifting the conversation back to the matter at hand, Huna sees the chance to ask if he has any extra resources to spare. She mentions that she's almost out of supplies, so she's hoping Han Fong might share some with her. He smirks when he hears this. She might still believe he's infatuated with her, which gives him the perfect chance to stir things up. Han Fong responds that he doesn't have much food left, but is willing to share with Huna if she responds to the message he sent her a few days ago. He then leans in closer, suggesting she come over to his place and spend a few days with him. Han Fong even gives her a hug, putting on a charming playboy act. Naturally, Huna is taken aback. Her eyes widen in surprise as she looks at him. She steps back and says she didn't quite understand what our boy was asking. At the moment, if he wants to discuss it, they can always chat online. Of course, we all know she's just putting on an act. In response, Han Fong turns away, losing interest. Since Huna isn't on board with his mischievous plan, he feels there's no reason to continue the conversation. However, the opportunistic person grabs our hero's clothes, stopping him from leaving. In a soft and hesitant tone, she mentions that she feels Han Fong has changed recently and adds that she has always been sincere with her feelings. However, she doesn't want to give the impression that she's with Han Fong solely for his money. So she asks our guy for some time to consider his proposal. Han Fong, on the other hand, appears both surprised and pleased that Huna is taking his offer seriously. But in reality, our guy is glaring at her with intense anger. If he hadn't already experienced death once, he might have been deceived by Huna's falsehoods. Right now, he just wants to tear away her deceitful facade and reveal her true nature. He also remembers the accomplice who played a part in taking his life. He regrets not discovering the identity of his killer. However, it occurs to him that he would likely repeat his past actions, waiting for Huna and her boyfriend to attack him again so he can get his revenge. Returning to the present, Han Fong tells Huna he was only teasing her to gauge her reaction. Surprised by this revelation, Huna hadn't anticipated Han Fong resorting to such underhanded tactics. Han Fong then grips both of Huna's arms and looks her directly in the eyes, stating that he will be waiting for her honest response. He'll still be delivering some food to her tomorrow. After hearing this, she flatters him, telling him he's the best before leaving him on his own. As she turns away, she suggests they can always chat online. With a sly grin on her face, she walks away, knowing she's once again played him for a fool and can now get more from him. What she doesn't realize is that Han Fong is also smirking, aware that while Huna expects the supplies by tomorrow, it looks like he might not deliver after all. The following day, the storm intensifies, blanketing nearly every building in a heavy coat of snow. Meanwhile, our protagonist's phone is inundated with messages from Hunter repeatedly requesting the supplies she was promised. With each unanswered message, her frustration becomes increasingly evident. Despite the constant buzzing of his phone, our protagonist remains blissfully unaware as he enjoys a delicious pork meal. While others struggle to find anything to eat, he savors his pork chop with carefree contentment. As the days went by, Han Feng continued to experiment with his abilities with the food supplies he had. He sat down and was enjoying a meal, while he said that he had confirmed two things. The first was that meat couldn't be expanded limitlessly, and the second was that, like soybeans, meat could be produced limitlessly as well. With that, he had enough meat to last him for all eternity. Every time a stalk of beans sprouted, he would use half of it to grow more beans again, and he would only consume half of it. Han Feng used the same practice when cultivating meat as well. Under the two kinds of light, half a piece of steak with a few soybeans could produce a full piece of steak. As the process continued, it would yield more and more steak over time. After that, he conducted numerous tests and was satisfied that he wouldn't have to worry about having something to eat in the future. On August 2nd, the 19th day of the snowstorm, a reporter was giving the news in the midst of the catastrophic weather. He said that he was on Badu Hithai Island in Maldives, which was 78 kilometers from the equator. The average temperature there had lowered to around -42 degrees. The snow engulfed all the buildings and all the structures around them. The entire island had almost been completely engulfed in the snow, and the ocean was freezing up at a speed that could be observed with human eyes. According to the reports from expert readings, the ice layer had already reached 55 centimeters deep, and the situations in other countries were very similar as well. Han Feng watched the news and knew that the real situation was far worse than what the media was portraying. Suddenly, a huge explosion went off, and it startled him. He went to his window and looked at what was happening outside. It was already the 7th explosion in the past few days, and he wondered what was going on. As if that wasn't enough, he also saw a multitude of military helicopters flying around the vicinity. He quickly closed his curtains and looked very worried. He thought to himself that the situation outside was also a cause for panic for the owners. They were all in the basement car park trying to trade for necessary goods and food supplies. The situation was really dire, and people needed to survive by any means necessary. Sadly, there were also many owners who used the opportunity to take advantage of others, which led to several conflicts. Han Feng noticed that a message was sent in the group chat, telling owners who had been facing difficulties to head down to the basement car park to receive necessary resources for free. Han Feng went down and was walking through the parking lot while severely suffering from the effects of the cold. It was way too cold, and he had a bad, runny nose. The only reason he came down was to gather information, and if it weren't for that, he wouldn't be there. The people who stood in the queues were having little squabbles about who cut in front of them. Han Feng remembered that before he was reborn, there was a rebellion in that neighborhood, and he thought that it must have been related to the people who were currently arguing. Still, he was surprised to see that they were really giving away resources instead of scamming people. He didn't understand what was going on, but decided to find out the real situation of things first. As he looked around, he noticed that the number of households facing difficulties was quite high. He then noticed a man who was yelling at the person giving out supplies, who happened to be Zhang. The man was angry because he had handed over several large boxes of resources before, but now they were giving him very little food. Zhang then tried to explain that everyone was given an equal amount of resources. The man wasn't having it, and he demanded that the resources he donated earlier be given back to him. Zhang apologized and told him that the resources couldn't be returned. He hoped that the man could look at the bigger picture since the disaster was still ongoing. Once the disaster is over, he will pay back the man several times the amount in cash. Regardless, the man couldn't be reasoned with. He wondered how long the snowstorm would last. At that point, all he wanted was for his donations to be given back to him. The other people on the line got tired of his bickering because he was holding up the line. They found him annoying and told him to stop being shameless. Some thought that he just wanted to get more resources than other people. The clamors rose up, and everyone spoke against him. They told him to get lost since he had already gotten his food because everyone else wanted to eat. They also thought he was selfish and wasn't considering the fact that the committee was having a hard time as well. Han Feng just silently watched from a distance, and he knew that there was no way the committee would give anyone back their resources in their current situation. Nevertheless, he thought the people were shameless for trying to place themselves on a higher moral ground against those who donated more resources. Lai approached him and thought that people were also acting shamelessly. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days, as his cheeks were very thin and his lips had cracks. Han Feng greeted him and said that it had been a while since they saw each other. After the formalities, Lai told him that he was trembling from being flustered and powerless. Han Feng was surprised that Lai referred to his situation as something that wasn't too bad. Lai's stomach let out a loud growl, and he said that it had been difficult to suppress his hunger by just drinking water. Han Feng was shocked that the guy didn't have any food left. Lai said that he was thinking of helping the neighbors previously, which caused him to donate most of his resources to the committee. In the end, his food supplies at home ran out before the snowstorm ended. The resources that the committee was giving out were too little as well. If Lai had known, he would have kept more supplies for himself. Looking at his desperate situation, Han Feng called Lai to the side and asked him for a favor. In return for it, he was going to give Lai 4 packs of instant noodles and 2 sausages. He told Lai not to think too little of it because he didn't have much left in stock. Lai thought that Han Feng was just looking for an excuse to give him free food, and he promised not to forget the grace that was shown to him for the rest of his life. Lai said to leave the small matter to him, and Han Feng replied to him by saying that he should come and collect the food at his place later. After that, Lai went ahead to join the queue to collect his share of resources first. Han Feng was happy that he was able to bribe the brickhead easily with noodles and sausages. That way, he wouldn't have to personally come down to gather information in the future. As much as he felt sorry for Lai, it still was more important for him to comfortably lay on his sofa, eating delicious food and playing video games. Suddenly his name was yelled out, and as he turned to see who was calling him, Huina slapped him. Han Feng was still confused, and she told him that he really disappointed her. Huina yelled out, asking Han Feng why he wasn't replying to her messages. Everyone else turned their attention to them because of how loud her voice was. Han Feng was still in shock and couldn't believe that she just slapped him. He hadn't even settled her debts for betraying him in his past life, but she just lapped him for no cause or reason. Han Feng was beyond angry and wondered if she really thought that he was that easy to bully. Huiyan mockingly asked if he was deaf or mute because he hadn't responded to a single thing she had been saying. He took a deep breath and told Huina that the situation had changed. She was shocked to hear that the supplies had been stolen. Han Feng was doing a really good job at lying to her and making her look like a fool. He told her that he placed the resources outside his door and went back in to get his keys, but they were gone by the time he came back out. Huina was still persistent and asked if he had looked for it, but he told her that he hadn't found any clues since then. She still tried to act like a good person and asked him if he still had any resources at all. Han Feng said that what he had left wasn't much anymore, and it would last him for a few days if he ate 1 meal a day. She acted like she was very happy to hear that, but suddenly switched up like a deranged witch. She desperately asked to split the resources and eat only 1 meal every 2 days. That way, they would be able to get through the disaster together. Han Feng couldn't believe how shameless she was to utter such useless words to him. To her, he was nothing but a tool to be used when needed. After taking a deep breath, Han Feng agreed to her demands, saying that he made a promise to her after all. She thanked him and asked him to bring it down for her. Han Feng said it would be done later at night and told her that he would send a message when he was done packing them. She turned to head back and told him to go back home as well so that he doesn't catch the flu. Han Feng looked fed up with the witch as he bid her farewell and told her to wait till nighttime. That night, the blizzard was blowing violently, and the buildings had slowly started to freeze up. Huiyan had sent countless notifications to Han Feng, saying that she was at his lobby and asking when he was coming down. She wondered what he could have been doing because he wasn't replying to her messages or picking up her calls. She sat by the wall and was slowly freezing to death while waiting for him. Huiyan wondered if she was going to get stood up again, but hoped that it wouldn't be the case. Her terrible situation doubled down because the lift had also stopped working. With no other choice, she took the stairs and started climbing up to Han Feng's apartment. She cursed him out and said that if it weren't for the resources, she wouldn't be looking for him. Huyen barely had any strength as she climbed the stairs because she had been starving for a few days. She got to the 16th floor and was almost there when she noticed that the emergency lights were also broken. She looked up and saw a strange, shadowy figure above her, and the person was holding on to something. Clenching her chest and calming her racing heart, she asked the person to identify themselves. The person then dropped the bag that they were holding, and it went straight for her head. As it landed on her, the lights suddenly came back on. She called Han Feng's name, and there he was, standing in front of her with some bags. He apologized to her and said that he fell asleep. When he saw her messages, he came running down with the resources, but he didn't expect the lights to suddenly go off. He said that he bumped into a rail and mistakenly dropped the flower on her head. Huena was furious and asked if he was a pig, also saying that he couldn't do anything properly. She was completely disgusted at her state and at him. Han Feng secretly smiled to himself because this was something he had specially prepared for her. Slowly but surely, he was definitely going to get back at her. He then offered her the 2 leather bags he was with, saying that those were his remaining supplies. She opened the bag and saw that every item was spoiled and already moldy. It was basically trash. Han Feng then said that he had to eat carefully to keep so much of the leftovers in stock. Huyen, on the other hand, couldn't believe the filth that he handed to her. It was so dirty, and she wondered if any of it was edible. Han Feng grabbed the bag and told her that if she didn't like it, she should give it back. Huyen was beyond desperate because she had been starving for a while. She snatched it back and told him that she never said that she didn't want it. He looked at her with pity and couldn't believe that she was the so-called goddess whom he had been pursuing with all his might. Huyen continued analyzing the items and figured that their insides should be fine even though the outside was black. She said that she should be able to eat the apple if she peeled it with a knife. There was barely anything left of the flower, but she still took it from him. At least there was still half of it left. As Han Feng went back up the stairs, he stopped to look at the foolish girl and said that the spoiled food should be enough to give her an upset stomach for a few days. It also wasn't possible to take a shower in that weather, so he said that she should let the flower stay on her for a while. As he walked back to his apartment, he noticed that there was something strange about the air. A shadow was slowly following him, so he stepped into a corner. As the person approached, he grabbed them by their jacket and slammed them into the ground. He was about to feed the person a knuckle sandwich when he noticed that it was a cute girl wearing glasses. Han Feng asked her what she was doing and if she was following him. The poor girl just lay on the floor and couldn't wait for this creep to get off of her. She didn't utter a single word and instead just stared at him. Seeing that she was refusing to speak, Han Feng threatened to tear off her clothes if she didn't say anything. Still, the girl just innocently looked at him and was silent. Han Feng saw there was no hope, and he got off her, also saying that he would let her go this time. As he walked away, he told her to get back home quickly and to stop playing pranks and being mischievous. He suddenly stopped and noticed the girl was tugging on his jacket. He asked her what the problem was, but the girl still didn't utter a word. Han Feng told her to stop staring like a creep, and if she wasn't going to say anything, then he would leave. The girl then pointed in the opposite direction, and he figured that she was asking him to follow her. The two of them got to her room, and he couldn't believe how huge the place was. He was also completely baffled at how much supplies the girl had prepared beforehand. She confirmed to him that she already knew the snowstorm was going to happen. The girl spoke like a dumb neat and told him that her calculations resulted in the fact that an ice age would occur. She said that she had mentioned it in the group chat, and Han Feng realized that she was the strange outcast in the group who knew about the snowstorm. He said it was awesome, but then asked if she brought him to her house just to talk about her calculations. The girl pointed towards some screens, and Han Feng saw recordings of himself that showed when he was purchasing supplies. He got nervous and asked the girl if she had been monitoring him. As she undressed herself, she gave him the same affirmative answer. Han Feng was shocked to see the young girl's unclad body. He asked her why she was suddenly taking off her clothes, and she said she felt hot. He obviously misunderstood her and then asked her to put her clothes back on. The girl wore a big shirt instead, and they both sat down on the sofa while she used her laptop. He then confirmed that she was monitoring him because she was suspicious of him hoarding resources before the snowstorm. The main purpose of his being monitored was so that she could check if there was a possibility of cooperation between them. Han Feng then asked what the whole cooperation was meant to be. The weird crawled over and was in between his legs, which made him very uncomfortable. His face went red when he saw that her clothes were nearly revealing her backside, and he asked her what she was doing. She dragged out a generator and asked him to teach her how to use it. Han Feng was dumbfounded at the girl's request. After a while, the generator was put on, and he showed her the basics of operating it. When he was done teaching her, he asked if there was anything else that she needed. She pointed over to the other side of the room, and Han Feng began lecturing her on different equipment. He taught her how to use a heater to get hot water, and told her to remember to close the valve when she was done. Next up, the weird girl learned that she was supposed to put raw meat in the freezer, but she needed to remove the packaging first. Han Feng didn't understand how someone was so inept at basic survival skills. After that, he taught her the safety measures needed when connecting a cooking gas and told her to pay close attention to the procedures. Before he knew it, he was preparing dinner for her while teaching her how to cook and make the food more delicious. After that, a full-course meal was prepared, and they sat down to enjoy themselves. He even had to remind the girl to eat the food while it was still hot. It was as if he had become a full-time nanny, and the girl's ability to take care of herself was driving him crazy. The girl ignored him and continued enjoying the food. He nervously told her that he was kidding, but the whole ordeal was putting a serious mental strain on him. He turned to tell the girl that he was going back home once he was done eating, but she had already passed out on the table. She barely finished her food, and she fell asleep while eating. Han Feng couldn't believe the kind of person he just met. He put her on the couch and covered her before taking his leave. As he walked out, he said it was like having a child. He got back into his apartment and went to sleep. The next morning, the girl came knocking at his door, and he wondered what was going on so early in the morning. She had brought a lot of supplies for him, and he said that she was too courteous for the gesture. The amount of stuff on his door dazzled him. He then asked her if there was something she needed, and she asked him to teach her again. Han Feng didn't want to, but he still accepted to do it. After a few days of interacting with her, Han Feng confirmed that the girl was a complete idiot. It was obvious that she had lived her entire life indoors because she lacked the most general knowledge of things. Nevertheless, the girl was very interested in learning about self-reliance, and she dragged him to her house every day to teach her. As horrible as the food looked, her cooking skills had still slightly improved. Thanks to their horrible situation, many people would die to eat something like that. But if it were normal times, a dog wouldn't even eat what she cooked. Han Feng realized that he didn't know the girl's name yet and proceeded to ask. She told him that her name was True Eye of the Evil King, but he asked her to pretend like he didn't ask. There was no way in hell that he was calling her by that name in any lifetime. Meanwhile, in the car park, a fight had broken out between people who were fighting over supplies. People were trying to get their goods, and others were telling them to prove that the items actually belonged to them. It was complete chaos everywhere. Some people were prepared to die rather than hand over their resources to the bullies. Fires erupted everywhere, and they were trying to protect what was theirs with whatever weapon they could find. Others risked their lives to steal so that they would have a better chance at surviving the treacherous days ahead. The ones who weren't able to defend themselves got beat to a pulp and had their supplies taken away. Zhang walked into the place and saw the chaos that went on. When he got some blood stains on his trousers and shoes, he brought a horn and calmed down the mob with the loud noise. With the mob's attention turned to him, he asked them if they were done with their silly fights. Zhang asked them if they didn't find it ridiculous that they were fighting to the death because of the few resources that were left. They told him that he was very audacious to utter such words to them. He was the one who suggested that they donate their supplies, and they only got to receive a packet of instant noodles every few days. They told Zhang that if they didn't fight for it, then they were going to starve to death. Zhang confirmed the situation by asking if they were fighting for the last remaining supplies because the distributed resources weren't enough and the donated resources had run out. He called them ridiculous and implied that they were supposed to starve to death for their actions. He asked them to think carefully about the one who brought about the situation, and they said it was him. Jung picked up a loaf of bread on the ground and said he would help them remember. The bread, which was originally a few dollars, had been raised to tens or even hundreds of dollars by those who had abundant resources. To squeeze the people dry, a piece of bread was split into 5 or 10 pieces to auction. Jung told them that those people managed to get rich due to the disaster. Not only did they use up all their money, they were even having internal strife due to the few remaining resources. Jung said that it was ridiculous because the people who increased prices were the ones who had plenty of resources but did not donate any. They raised the prices with malice, but it was the rest who were going to starve to death. In an attempt to stir up the crowd, he asked them if the situation was fair. He used his charisma to raise their spirits and told the people to stand united to get back the resources that belonged to them. The mob felt that his words were right and that they weren't being treated fairly at all. They wondered why the ones on top had to benefit while the rest of them were being starved to death. Jung watched the mob as they got riled up and decided that they needed to get back their share of resources. They didn't see it as anything wrong. Instead, they felt that they were just taking back what rightfully belonged to them. Jung had a sly smile because he knew that his plans were working exactly as he wanted. Lai saw the chaos that had ensued and concluded that everyone had gone mad. He picked up his phone to text Han Feng and tell him that something big was about to happen. As time went by, the temperatures got worse and the ice engulfed the building. While Han Feng was lying on his couch, he heard the sound of notifications on his phone. Lai had texted him and told him that the people had gone mad. He told Han Feng that Zhang was inciting the owners to snatch resources from the rest, and they had started going from door to door, prying people's locks. Han Feng panicked because he knew that his life would be over if they found out how many supplies he had stored in his room. Lai told him not to face the mob head-on because they all had weapons. He suggested that Han Feng should hide and lay low. Han Feng nervously opened his curtain to see what was going on outside. He didn't expect things to turn out so badly, but at least he had 2 guns in case of a crisis. Since it was such an organized operation, if his resources were to be revealed to the crazy mob, they would definitely eat him up, leaving nothing but bones. He went to where he kept all of his supplies and told himself that he needed to be ready for it. Han Feng brought some items and started preparing his defenses to face the worst possible scenario. He connected some wires and tin foil to his door, but the lights suddenly went out as he laid down the wires. The snowstorm had finally caused a full power failure all over the city. People in different buildings noticed that those who were opposite them didn't have any power as well. They tried to contact management, but they couldn't because there was no signal as well. Han Feng figured that the outage would have happened sooner or later due to the overload usage of power trying to keep people warm. Moreover, the buildup of snow and low temperature made it difficult for any kind of maintenance to be done. As he carried a fuel gallon to refill his generator, he said that the situation meant the power failure and signal loss might be permanent that time around. While cranking the generator to come on, he also said that once the owners realized that power would never come back, the feelings of panic would lead to an even more insane rebellion. That's when the real hell would begin. Meanwhile, 30 minutes before that, we see Huiyan slurping on some noodles while having a conversation with someone. The person mentioned in the group chat that they would buy all resources at 50 times the regular market price. Because of that, the underprivileged paupers shut their mouths. The man told Huiyan that he only spent about 500,000 for all the resources he had. He also took out some of them to auction for a high price, and this caused the others to get into a fight as they tried to buy the items. Due to that, he managed to earn quite a bit of money. The man then caressed Huiyan's cheeks, proving to her that following him was the right choice for her. Huiyan agreed because she was desperately hungry. On the other hand, the man was glad that he could do anything he wanted with her, as long as he had resources. It became noisy outside, and they heard voices asking what the situation on their level was. The people outside gathered their tools and got ready to pry open the door of the room. The man stood up to check on things and wondered why it was so noisy in the middle of the night. He went to the door to listen to what the people were talking about. As they prepared to break in, some said that they remembered the man was buying resources from a lot of owners. He was the one who spearheaded the whole talk in the group chat about raising the prices of supplies. As they kicked the door, the man was pushed off. They continued trying to kick his door down, and he became clueless. He was shaking nervously and was trying to figure out how to save himself. Finally, the crazy mob broke down the door and got ready to raid the apartment. Meanwhile, Han Feng was using his generator to heat up his room. He was trying to test out the trap he had set up on his door, but he found it weird that there was no power. Suddenly, the wires sparked, and there was a little explosion that went off. He quickly dropped the sparking wire before it would send him to the pearly gates. After he recovered, he picked it back up and wished that the internet was still working because whatever he was doing was proving to be very difficult. Someone suddenly knocked on his door, and he peeked out to make sure that it wasn't the owners who were raiding the place. He saw that it was the little girl from earlier and furiously asked what she could possibly want at that time. The girl, with her usual unfazed attitude, told him that she wanted his help again. He found it troublesome that she was looking for him while he was busy with something. Suddenly, the memories of his death flashed through his mind, and he let go of the door handle. He then told her that the owners were going around, breaking doors and robbing people of their resources. Han Feng told the little girl to return to her room quickly and that he wouldn't open his door for her. The girl stood outside for a brief moment, but continued banging on his door and requesting his help. Some time passed, and she sat outside, shivering in the harsh cold conditions. She started hearing the voices of the owners who were getting closer. Some of them were trying to be quick in order not to let their subordinates get ahead of them again. They were ready to break down any door, regardless of whether it belonged to a fellow owner or not. Just as they popped into the corner where she was sitting, she was suddenly gone. The guys noticed that no one had been to that floor yet, so they split up and started prying the doors. The two owners who stood in front of Han Feng's door got their crowbars ready. They knocked on his door and said that they were there to deliver resources. Han Feng sat with his back to the door and covered the little girl's mouth so that she wouldn't make a sound as well. He was shaking nervously and hoping that they would pass his apartment without causing any trouble. When there was no response, the owners started frantically banging on his door like madmen. Han Feng whispered to the girl not to worry because his door had been reinforced, but she was still very unbothered by the situation. The door handle was so sturdy that they found it very hard to break it. They decided to head to the next apartment and leave a mark on Han Feng's door so that they would return when they were done. Han Feng was happy that they had given up, and he remembered that he told some constructors to reinforce his door and handle. When he finally got back to his senses, he quickly let go of the girl's mouth and asked if she was all right. He said that he was afraid that the owners would realize that there was someone there, which was why he held on to her like that. The little girl just thanked him for saving her because she had no idea what would have been her fate if she had been found. Han Feng put his ear on the door to listen closely and concluded that the guys had finally left. He got back to working on the security system for his door. He told her that once he was done fixing it, he would electrocute them to death if they dared to touch his door. He called it an electrocution defense measure. Han Feng told her that she wouldn't understand if he told her about it. He didn't even understand the basics themselves, and the lousy device was still too difficult for him to install. The girl suddenly blurted out that the device used electricity and voltage differences. Han Feng was shocked to find out that she actually had knowledge about it, and she told him that it was simple. The girl then started to guide him through the installation process. He told him that after he cuts off the power supply, he should wrap the bare wire around the door handle and make sure not to touch it if he loves his life. After that, he needed to connect the earth wire from the circuit box to the door handle and, lastly, turn on the power supply. Han Feng diligently followed her instructions, and the defense mechanism finally started working well. He couldn't believe it, and he asked her how she knew stuff like that. The girl started her useless rambling about the true eye of the evil king being able to see the truth of everything in the world. Han Feng cut her off immediately and told her to pretend like he didn't ask. He started putting the rest of his items in place and asked her to quickly state what she needed because he was very busy. The girl ignored him and dropped a lot of items from underneath her dress onto the couch. He called her attention again, and she told him that she would be staying with him from then on. It took some seconds for her words to click in his head, and he asked her what the hell she just said. He took it as a joke and said that it would never happen. Han Feng quickly told the little brat to return to her home at that moment, but she continued with whatever she was doing. His legs got tangled up in the wires, which made him trip and fall to the ground. His hands were suddenly glowing with a purple color, and he was surprised that the fall didn't hurt at all. He touched his coffee table with his enchanted hands, and it suddenly became as soft as a blanket. Looking closer at his hands, he noticed the purple light and wondered if that was what caused his table to become soft. Even the toolbox and everything else he touched at that moment became as soft as a marshmallow. He started fiddling around with his hammer and wondered how the purple light caused items to turn soft. Moments later, Han Feng realized that the little girl was still in the room, and she was just watching him silently. He quickly panicked, but she was intrigued by the ability he just displayed. After his powers were exposed to her, the strange little girl looked at him seriously and assumed that Han Feng was also an emissary chosen by the true eye of the evil king. She looked very happy and enthusiastic as she spewed complete nonsense from her mouth, and Han Feng was completely confused. Seeing that the girl's brain was nothing but silly, he decided to go with the flow. He said that he was also a subordinate chosen by the evil boss king, and that was why unusual phenomena sometimes happened around him. Han Feng's fooling is stopped midway because the girl wants to tell him something. She said that since they were both fellow emissaries, then it was only right that they helped out each other. The girl wanted him to share his apartment with her, but this just made Han Feng more confused. As he tried to make her understand that it was weird for such a young girl to stay with an older guy, she quickly bolted out of the room. Han Feng's flaccid hammer was still in his hands as he heard the door slam shut. He hadn't agreed to her request yet, and he didn't get a chance to tell her his mind. He wondered if she really thought that his room was the lair of the evil king, but he decided to forget about it and leave the girl to her crazy fantasies. Han Feng turned his attention back to his hammer and asked himself what the purple light meant. The thought of the power of being able to turn things soft made him quite worried. With that in mind, he realized that the lights that he possessed were more than two kinds. This meant that there were still others that he hadn't discovered, and maybe he was way more overpowered than he thought. As he thought deeply, he remembered that the purple light showed up when he tripped over the cables and almost crashed into the coffee table. This book would have ended so fast, but I guess there were other plans in store for him. He tried to recall how he felt at that moment when he nearly lost his life. His body shook with fear, but suddenly the purple lights appeared around his hands again. He was shocked that he was actually able to activate the ability by recalling that past moment. Almost like he didn't even have faith in himself. The wires in his hands started to become very soft as well, and he realized that the purple light could also affect the cables. Han Feng decided to find out what else he could possibly turn soft with his abilities. He went to his kitchen and picked up a knife there. Then he activated the ability, and the steel swiftly became like jelly. The more he saw what he was capable of, the more he marveled at how his life had changed so much. He tested the blade on himself and highlighted how it had become so much like jelly. Nevertheless, his experiments didn't stop there. He went ahead to try out the purple light on many other items in his house, and he started to understand it better. So far as he knew, the longer he used the purple light on an item, the softer it became. Other than that, there was no other significant change that he had noticed. He played around with a soft spoon and thought about how useless this newfound ability was. His ability to multiply food and regenerate his wounds proved to be a whole lot more useful than just turning things to jelly. After thinking about it for a while, an idea finally came to his head. Han Feng thought about what would happen if he combined the purple light with another one. He proceeded to test it out on the knife and see what the outcome would be. The purple and green lights engulfed the kitchen knife as he yelled out "Bankai." To his great surprise, the jelly-like knife returned back to its original state. It was as if he was holding a brand new blade as he looked at his reflection on the knife. After seeing the outcome of his experiment, he looked over at the box of tissues on his table. While Han Feng trembled greatly, he used the same powers on a piece of tissue paper. Luckily, things turned out well for him. The tissue became as hard as a rock. Then he realized that he could change the toughness of an item by combining the two different lights. With this information, his newfound ability wasn't so useless anymore. Han Feng looked closer at the hardened tissue and said that the toughness was a bit extreme. In that brief moment, another idea popped into his mind, and he figured out how to make use of this power. Meanwhile, The owners who previously came to raid his apartment were on their way back from their raiding journey. As they walked down the stairs, one of them asked his comrade if he was really going to hand over the resources that they stole. The other guy replied by saying that only a ghost would do something as stupid as that. He also said that he didn't have enough resources for himself. If they do split up the resources, they would have to split it with the women and the elderly. They didn't see any justifiable reason to do that, but they had to keep the matter a secret. They would be screwed if someone found out that they were hoarding supplies for just themselves. One of them noticed something weird going on, and he told his partner to turn around and take a look. The guy turned quickly, and they flashed their lights on the wall. The guys noticed that the wall was wriggling, and they found it very weird. As if it were straight out of a classic horror movie, a horrid face slowly emerged on the wall. It looked as if someone was trapped inside as the face slowly pushed itself out. It came very close to one of the thief's faces, and he was frozen and scared on the spot. While they were still trying to understand what was going on, the scary face brought out its arms to grab them. They trembled at the scary creature in front of them and thought it was a ghost. Before the ghost could do anything heinous to them, the guys ran away quickly like little wimps. The ghost looked uncomfortable and was struggling to breathe as it tried to pull out its face. Finally, Han Feng was revealed to be the mastermind behind the scary prank. He had used his abilities to make the wall very soft, and he stuffed his face inside to chase away the owners. His face was finally free, and he said it was very strenuous to apply his ability to the entire wall. After struggling for a bit, he changed the texture of the wall to become very tough and decided to test out how sturdy it was. Using so much energy was making him tired, but he needed to secure his safety in that building. Han Feng then grabbed a sledgehammer and prepared to slam it against the hardened wall. He mustered up his strength and started swinging around like a brute. On the outside, we could see that the blizzard had frozen up the buildings like popsicles. After strenuously trying to break the wall down for a while, Han Feng concluded that the toughness was too extreme. He wasn't even able to scratch the surface of it. Over at the car park, the devilish cold had slowly started to freeze the ceiling and boards there. One of the guys who was stealing resources earlier submitted the few he was willing to give out. He told the collector that many owners were basically all out of food, but he managed to seize the few resources he had. Suddenly, an arm reached out and grabbed his shoulder. He turned to see who it was, but before he was able to, he suddenly got pinned down by a blonde-haired man. One man is aggressively confronting another, demanding to know where the stolen food is hidden. The person being questioned is on the ground, appearing frightened and defensive, insisting that they haven't hidden anything, and that everything they took is already present. The person in the blue hat is accusing the other of lying, stating that they clearly saw him take 3 large bags, but only handed over 1. The person on the ground, in a panicked and defensive manner, insists that there has been a mistake, swearing that everything they took has already been given up. The person, visibly frustrated and angry, prepares to strike the other man, accusing him of stubbornness and suggesting that a beating might force the truth out of him. The man on the ground looks fearful, bracing himself for the impending assault, while bystanders continue to observe the escalating confrontation without intervening. The blue hat person is suddenly interrupted, reacting with a serious and slightly surprised expression as someone off-screen tells him to stop. The tension is interrupted by the arrival of Wangs, who seems to hold some authority or respect. The person in the blue hat looks surprised and slightly worried as the Wangs addresses him, questioning why he is there. Wangs, who seems calm and rational, asks the person in the blue hat to release the man on the ground, suggesting that they can discuss the issue peacefully. The person in the blue hat reluctantly responds, expressing his concern that the man on the ground might be hoarding food meant for everyone, implying his actions are driven by a sense of injustice rather than mere aggression. Wangs kindly offers to take responsibility for resolving the issue, asking the person in the blue hat to leave it to him. His calm and reassuring demeanor suggests he is confident in handling the situation peacefully. The person in the blue hat, although still visibly anxious, agrees to step back, showing a mix of hesitation and relief as he decides to trust the Wang's approach. The person in the blue hat reluctantly decides to let the man on the ground go, stating that he is sparing him only because of the intervention of the Wang. The man on the ground reacts with a mix of relief and wariness as he is released. Man on the ground is being helped up by the Wang. His expression shows a mix of pain, exhaustion, and a hint of suspicion or defiance. Wang kindly offers his hand to the person on the ground, reassuring him with a comforting statement, likely telling him that everything is all right. The man on the ground, visibly moved and possibly relieved, begins to respond, addressing Wang respectfully. Wang is shown smiling softly, his expression exuding warmth and reassurance. Two large bags filled with food and supplies, with one bag tied shut and the other open, revealing various packaged items inside. The man is now explaining his situation to the Wang, apologizing and revealing that he has a family of 5 to feed, implying that the food rations they received were insufficient. His posture is defensive and remorseful, indicating his desperation and the difficult circumstances that led him to take the extra supplies. Wang offering his own rations to the man. The man receiving the food looks surprised and confused by this gesture, questioning why the man with glasses is doing this. He explaining the rules, emphasizing that collected items must be handed over and redistributed according to the number of people to ensure fairness. However, he also acknowledges the difficulties and challenges faced by the man with the family. The man expresses his gratitude, thanking the man multiple times, showing his deep appreciation and relief. He looks visibly emotional, holding the food close as he is told to quickly return home. The man who received help assures the Wang that if there's ever anything he can do in return, he should not hesitate to ask for old Wang's help, indicating his gratitude and willingness to support in the future. Wang responds warmly, encouraging him to reach out if he faces any difficulties, reinforcing a sense of mutual support and community. Wang addresses the group, advising everyone to collect their supplies quickly and return home. The group responds positively, acknowledging his instructions and expressing their respect and gratitude by addressing him politely. Some even suggest that he should also head back early, showing their appreciation and concern for his well-being. Group are questioning to Wang, curious about how he managed to persuade the person to surrender the hoarded food. They also express their confusion about why he chose to share his own rations with the man who took the supplies. He explains modestly that he didn't do much. He simply helped the man understand a principle or reasoning. The twins, reacting with surprise and curiosity, question what kind of reasoning he imparted. Their expressions suggest intrigue and a bit of awe, indicating that the approach of Wang. He mentioning that in the history of Country M, there have been several instances of violent conflicts caused by clashes of interests among different social levels. His serious expression and the way he adjusts his glasses suggest he is making a critical point about the importance of understanding. A chaotic and fiery setting likely depicting a riot or large-scale conflict. Such behavior is defined as a collective social action and implies that as long as participants are not caught in the act, they are not held accountable for their involvement. He explains his reasoning, stating that he told the individual that if he breaks the rules, the collective will not tolerate him, and he would simply be seen as a thief. His serious and shadowed expression underscores the gravity of his message. Wang explains that beyond the potential legal repercussions after the disaster ends, those who stole may also face retaliation from the original owners of the stolen goods. The group, particularly the twins, reacts with a sense of realization and concern, understanding the broader consequences of their actions beyond just immediate punishment. Wang is seen interacting amicably with the group, creating a sense of camaraderie and relief among the people. However, the old man in the foreground, partially hidden and observing from the shadows, watches the scene while smoking a pipe. The older man explains that within chaotic groups, there is often a leader who directs and influences the actions of the crowd. His expression is stern and contemplative, suggesting he has experience or insight into the nature of mob behavior. Wang is walking confidently with a cheerful expression, accompanied by the twins and other group members. Observing from a distance, the older man with the pipe remarks that times of chaos often give rise to heroes, suggesting that the young man with glasses is no ordinary individual. Han Feng striking hammer on a surface, likely a window or a with significant force. He holding a sledgehammer, appearing exhausted and determined as he tries to break through a window. His heavy breathing and tense posture indicate that he is in a stressful or urgent situation. Han Feng examines a tool or piece of equipment, commenting on the reinforcement of the basement, noting that it has been fully completed and the durability is confirmed. He is startled by a sudden noise in the background. He turns his head quickly, appearing alert and slightly tense. Still holding the tool, he rushing toward the source of the noise, with the thought running through his mind that it might be neighbors coming to steal supplies again. His posture and movement suggest urgency and readiness to confront the potential threat. Han Feng is cautiously approaching a door with a sledgehammer in hand, ready to defend himself. He peers through the peephole while demanding to know who is on the other side. Hyuna, dressed warmly in winter clothing, stands outside. Looking up with a determined yet emotional expression, she addresses Han Feng, revealing her presence and declaring that she has thought things through over the past few days. She admits she cannot ignore his feelings for her, indicating a significant and heartfelt conversation. Her tearful eyes and earnest demeanor suggest a moment of vulnerability and sincerity. Han Feng listens intently through the door. He is surprised by what he hears, as indicated by his expression and the exclamation mark. He reflects on the difficulty of discerning true intentions, stating that only those who truly love him would offer their affection unconditionally. His memories flush through his mind, where the man strikes land with brutal force, taking everything from him. His eye is filled with a mix of pain and realization as he recalls past words that mirror the present situation. A menacing figure cloaked in darkness looms behind Hyuna, wielding a large weapon with a sinister smile. Hyona's expression is serious and determined. Han Feng stands poised with a sledgehammer, looking determined and ready to confront the approaching threat. His inner monologue reveals his frustration and readiness to take extreme measures, as he expresses a desire to directly kill the two intruders, whom he refers to derogatorily. As he takes a step, suggesting he is either hesitating or pausing his movement, Han Feng pausing and thinking critically about his next move. He realizes that the power outage has left the surroundings in darkness, making his situation more precarious. He contemplates that if he fails to deliver a fatal strike in one blow, there is a significant risk that he could be counterattacked. He is contemplating the use of an electric shock as a potential defensive measure, but he acknowledges the difficulty in making it work effectively. He realizes that for the electric shock to be successful, he would need to trick the intruders into simultaneously grabbing the door handle, which he sees as an impossible task. Han Feng tries to steady himself, gripping a railing and reminding himself to remain calm. He recognizes that he has finally reached a critical moment that he has been waiting for, and emphasizes the need to maintain composure and carefully assess the situation. He is deep in thought, gripping his weapon as he reflects on the situation. He identifies that his greatest threat is not Lai Huina, but the man hidden in the shadows. Han Feng is strategizing his next move, contemplating how to accurately determine the enemy's position within the confines of the house. He understands the urgency of the situation, recognizing that he needs to strike decisively and swiftly. His thought bubbles reflect his internal struggle to find a way to locate the hidden threat without exposing himself to danger. His reaction suggests that he has just realized something unexpected. He believes the man is hiding in a blind spot near their door. Han Feng is cautiously feeling along the wall, trying to locate something specific. He indicates that they believe they are close to finding it. He thinks that they acknowledge the need to spend some time on whatever task they are about to undertake. His hand is depicted with a glowing, possibly magical, aura surrounding it. He explained, but it might just work. Hyuna stands outside. Her posture and expression convey a sense of urgency and concern as she tries to communicate with Han Feng inside. We see a tense exchange between two characters outside a door. Hyuna prepares to be engaged in a conversation with a man who is holding a large bat, implying he might be up to Han Feng threatening. The man seems skeptical about the effort they're putting into their current plan, questioning if it's truly worth it. However, he rationalizes his actions by mentioning that the person they are targeting still possesses valuable resources, including a significant amount of supplies acquired before a recent disaster. The man with the bat, still standing outside the door, he remarks that the resources possessed by their target will be sufficient to sustain them for several days, implying they intend to take these supplies by force. The glow of a mysterious purple symbol in the background suggests something unusual. The mysterious purple glow has taken on a more defined and menacing shape, resembling some sort of energy or entity emerging from the wall. The hooded man, appearing cautious, asks if the other person hears any noise, indicating that he is starting to sense something off. Hyuna responds with confusion, asking, "What noise?" The tension is evident on her face, with beads of sweat highlighting her anxiety. The hooded man expresses a growing sense of unease, stating that he hears something coming from behind him. The hooded man is struck violently by a powerful force, depicted by the vibrant and erratic streaks of purple energy. The force appears sudden and unexpected, indicated by the character's wide-eyed expression and the dramatic impact lines surrounding them. Hoodman is thrown backward, their body twisting mid-air from the force of the blow. The motion lines emphasize the speed, indicating that the man was caught completely off guard. Blood splatters suggest a serious injury, adding a sense of danger and urgency to the scene. Hyuna reacts with shock, her wide eyes and open mouth conveying surprise and confusion. Hayona's body language shows her hesitation and unease as she tries to understand what has happened. She leans slightly back, her hand near her chest, as if bracing for another unexpected moment. He hesitantly reaches for the door, her expression a mix of fear and determination, as she braces herself for whatever might be lurking behind it. The cold air and her visible breath heighten the tense, suspenseful atmosphere. Han Feng confidently steps forward, holding a fire extinguisher and wearing a sly grin, ready to take action as smoke swirls around him, hinting at his intent and determination. Hayona looks stunned, her eyes wide with shock and uncertainty. As she tries to comprehend the unfolding situation, he is suddenly struck by a powerful blast, sending her flying backward as she screams in pain and surprise, enveloped in a burst of energy and debris. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.